those of you who are just joining us, appreciate you being here. We're going to have a conversation today with Counter Connor. Those of you who are familiar with the people I interact with know who Counterpoints is. He's kind of like a bit of a rogue. You guys know what a rogue is? Part of the rogues gallery. One of the haters. One of the also occasional friends of the show. First time watcher, long time fan. Thanks so much, guys. My hair's not good right now. It's like doing this weird thing. But yeah, we're gonna have a conversation with him. I think there's some. I don't know exactly what he wants to talk about. My guess is it's going to be something related to either Sitch and Adam, Actual Justice Warrior, and I actually want to ask him some like more personal questions. This is going to sound very weird and strange to a lot of you, but I just had there was a moment in time about 2 or 3 months ago where I just woke up in the middle of the night, and I don't often think about counterpoints or counterpoints or Connor, but I was like, I really want to interview Counterpoints. And I don't know why, but I had this someone needs to interview this guy. And again, I don't know exactly what that impulse, where that came from exactly. Hang on. Maybe that's a little better. Okay. I'm a little overexposed. But yeah, and so I had questions about his personal life. And I don't know why. There's just something about who this person is that interested me in that moment in the middle of the night. There's nothing wrong with that. I just want to be clear. All right, I'm going to give him a call. Hey, Connor, how are you?
How are you? Let me turn some music off.
Are you live? I'm live.
I am not live.
Okay.
I was just going to I figured this was going to be a little bit more chill than our usual.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So I'll probably just steal content from you later.
No, perfect. Yeah, if you want to just take the stream, that's fine. Or if you want to do anything, I give you permission. Oh, do you want me to put you on screen maybe?
I don't know if... Thank you.
Yeah, I can do that. One second.
Yeah. People can empathize more with a face.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think.
Listen, Counter, I don't know if you heard any of my introduction, but I've had this fascination with you as a concept in the last few months, because I see you doing your wargaming stuff, and then I see Mrs. Points on Twitter, and then I see your pictures with your kids, and I'm just and I want to know more about your life. And I don't know why that is. I really don't give a lot of damns about a lot of people in this space. I care about my friends. I care about people that I'm close to, but usually I don't get that kind of feeling I wonder what's behind this guy. And then he says some fascist things, and I'm but then he says some very base things and very woke things. And so I don't really have a good sense of Counter Connor. That's one box. And then the second box is, recently you and I have had a few run-ins where we've had both run-ins against each other and against mutual combatants, where Sitch and Adam and a few other people, I think Rob Noor as well, where we are antagonistic to each other. I think we both can agree that we drive each other up a wall sometimes, but we've also had mutual enemies. And so shit's wild right now. Where do we stand? What's going on? What are your thoughts? We can touch any of that or none of that.
No, I think you have, I grew up with a very tough woman for a mother.
Oh yeah.
And so I always liked tough ladies. And if there's anything that you know about Mrs. Points, it's probably that she's a tough lady.
She's funny.
Yeah, she does, and she doesn't take shit either. If I give her shit, she's just as likely to give it back to me. So basically, I kind of joke about it because I think this is where we're at right now between you and me. Two people drive me crazy, and it's you and my wife. So you guys actually share a talent with each other in that respect. It is a kind of
love. Now, I'm not. This is not gay. And if there was gay, there would be nothing wrong with that.
It's platonic love.
It is platonic, but it is a form of love, because I do think that there are certain people who get you feeling emotions. I'll give you another example. I think Rob Noor is such a person. Now, do I love Rob Noor? Yes, in a way, because
you might love to hate him. It's like
yeah. Go ahead.
It's I was gonna say it's like Richard Lionheart and Saladin, right? You know, they're generals on opposing sides of the Crusades or whatever, but they respect each other. So I think Richard Lionheart's horse got killed at some point, so Saladin gifted him a horse, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a mutual respect for combatants in the arena.
That said, there are times when I feel that we have an interaction, right, that's pretty acrimonious. Like you'll say I'm a dirtbag, or I'll say you're a fascist or something like that, and then I'll see your
Hmm.
wife tweet something like, "Oh, I'm not like at all put out of sorts when someone is on train tracks and gets run over," and I'm just like, "Oh, it's pretty funny." Or like I'll see her post a picture of you with your kids, like holding one of your kids. I'm like, "Oh, this guy's a pretty good guy." And then other times I'm like, "This is a bad cop." And so, do you mind
That's
me
fine.
starting with the personal, and then we can get into the recent stuff?
Of course.
Okay. So I was really fascinated. First is when I saw that you opened up another channel. It was actually kind of weird, and tell me if I'm wrong.
Mm.
Counterpoints, you rebranded that to be your gaming and hobbyist channel, and Counterfire became your political content type channel, and that's kind of that persona. That's right, right?
Yeah, so just to give an overview for the sake of accuracy, if anybody catches it up. So, Counterpoints, I originally just posted everything I did there. Everything went there. But the Warhammer 40K stuff was doing so much better algorithmically that eventually it just
Mm.
made no sense to keep posting because I was making more money, getting more attention, getting more comments, more engagement. So the main channel stayed Counterpoints. I changed it to Counterpoints 40K. Counterfire became the debate channel,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have a neglected essays channel that I do want to get to eventually. But the truth is, I'm doing too many things at the same time.
Yeah, you have a lot of interest. That's fair to say. And,
Yeah.
and so again, you don't have to answer any of these questions, but when I saw the kind of gaming thing, I was like, oh, this is a real person, and this is a real person that has like a life. And oftentimes in this space, I feel like, you know, you get stuck in something with President Sunday, and you're like, who are these weirdos, or like who's Tim? Like it's hard for me to, like, for example, imagine President Sunday at a Sunday dinner, or someone else. Let me think. Vegan Gains out and about, like at a piano recital. Okay, and so sometimes these you guys are just abstract concepts in my head. But when I saw that, go ahead. You can. I see you have some thoughts.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, so I think the reason why, because by the way, like Twitch and YouTube politics drives me up the wall.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
I think I think it legitimately gives me heartburn sometimes, but I can't leave it because these people, they're like, sometimes I think about it, but these people, they're my freaks. Like I love them. Like President Sunday as an example. Like I knew plenty of weird autistic debate bro smart ass guys in high school who were just like President Sunday. I knew people like Rob Knorr who were like, oh, he's the redneck. Oh, well, turns out he actually like reads things and pays attention and tries to talk about the news. So like when it came to high school, there was like the jocks and the potheads and the skater kids and all that kind of stuff. And then there was like political nerds
Mm.
who always went into one of those tribes, but they never really were fully a part of that tribe because their primary interest was politics or philosophy or religion.
So in a way, you kind of see it as an extension of existing tropes that you've already recognized and are kind of heightened almost by shared interest in politics and news and that kind of thing. And so, in a way, you're kind of oddly protective over even the people who you vehemently, and you had it in with Sunday pretty brutally, bro.
Oh, dude, for a long time there was like few people who I disliked more in the space than Sunday, and it's because he's smug, he's haughty, he's rude, he's abrasive, like all that kind of stuff. But then I just watched some of his content. I was like, oh, he does that because it's entertaining to his audience to see him be smug and rude and abrasive and all that kind of stuff. And he actually does have some intelligence behind his, I would say, haughty demeanor.
And you find him endearing and funny in a way sometimes, or
Yeah. No,
yeah,
I find funny cruelty endearing, and
yeah,
I do descend from like an Irish family. So if you're mean but you're funny, I like that.
interesting. Okay, so there's a little hook that I can sort of get into right now because you mentioned the jocks, the whatever. So paint us a picture. You don't have to give specific states or regions. Like, where are you from generally?
So I mean, I'll just give as much information as is already out there. I was born in Boston, but I was
Wow,
only three. Actually, specifically Concord.
really?
I Yes, and my parents grew up in Newton of all places,
Oh, I know Newton.
and
Yes, I know Newton.
yeah, so Newton was like the nice side of town. So they
Yeah.
lived in the crappy house on the nice side of town. And so when I think my mom corrected me recently, when I was 2 months old, they moved down to Florida in order to be closer to my paternal grandparents. Both my parents are accountants. They're Jesus freaks. They're Reaganite conservatives,
Oh,
but they're from the Northeast, so they're like more liberal than most Republicans, right?
yeah.
And
That's like a Reaganite, Bushite, Connecticut Republican type, New England Republican.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that's how I was raised. And so when people in middle school or high school were talking shit about Republicans, I was like, my family's Republican. They're not like that. Turns out a healthy chunk of the Republican Party is like that. But I grew up in a pretty social conservative home, but we moved every 3 years. So we moved to Belgium when I was 8 years old. I went to a French school.
What?
Yep, yep.
Wait,
I
that's
went
wait,
to
wait.
a
Can we pause? I know I want to let you do the
sure.
narrative, but that's so interesting to me. They were moving accountants. Were they accountants for some like the military or something? Maybe.
Yes.
Okay.
So they worked for electronic data systems, which was the people who run NMCI, which is the military's email system. And so even though my dad wasn't
Fascinating.
military, he worked for a military
He was
contractor
yeah.
who had a base in Belgium, and then as a result of them having
You
a base
went
in
to a
Belgium,
European school in Belgium, and
I
you
spoke
learned.
French.
How's your
I
French
spoke
now?
French.
Probably not so good on purpose.
Non, c'est okay.
Oh,
C'est pas, actually, you're tripping me up now because now I'm getting
don't
self-conscious.
worry about it.
But c'est pas extraordinaire, mais c'est okay.
I have someone in my
But
chat
no,
who said it's bad, but no, I don't believe that. I believe it's excellent.
non, mon français est extrêmement bien pour un Américain.
Does that mean
So
it's
anyways,
okay for
but
an American?
yeah, for
Nice.
my yeah, well, in Spanish and French
I
have a
speak
lot of
Spanish,
crossover,
just
right?
so you know.
Yeah,
Okay.
I should have learned Spanish,
Did you know that I'm
but
Hispanic? Did you know that?
I figured,
You
I
figured?
guess.
What did you think I was
Yeah.
just like? You know that I'm a first generation American, right? Did you know that? Sorry, this is about you,
No.
but okay. Well, we'll go back to you. So you went to
No, and
Bel.
it doesn't have to be exclusively me.
Sure,
I don't
sure.
mind
But
learning things about you as well.
I just want to let you know, full disclosure, I am Latino.
Mhm.
Now, if that is like some kind of sticking point, I know
It's
that.
not.
Okay.
I wanna build I want to make America great again by making the entire Americas, a United States
Oh,
of
we're gonna get
America.
into your voting record. Don't worry about that. Okay, so you were in Belgium. You're initially New England born. Do you feel any kind of allegiance to New England? Just so you're aware, I'm very familiar with New England. I'm a Celtics fan, but it sounds like you were only there for the really early formative years.
Yeah. I don't have anything. Like I'll cheered for the Pats when they were winning, chilled for the Celtics when they were winning, but I cheered for the Magic when they were winning
Hmm.
because I spent most of my time in Central Florida, and then so nothing specific, and I'm not a huge sports guy.
Okay, so you're traveling to different places. You're going to Europe, and what's next?
Yeah, this is actually probably important for the way that I view the world. Both of my grandparents are World War II veterans. So my paternal grandfather
Nazis.
was
Sorry.
a CB. Yeah, he died in a concentration camp. He fell out of the guard tower. My grandfather on my dad's side was a CB, so he was like a naval engineer, and I think he went to Guam, so he was in the Pacific Theater, but he never really saw
Mm.
action. And then my maternal grandfather, who I more identify with because he's a jerk as well, he was a B-17 navigator in Europe. So he showed up like a year before the war ended, and he did go on some combat missions,
Sure, yeah.
and he flew prisoners of war out of Germany while it was still hot. And so he had PTSD and all sorts of issues, but he was overall like a pretty hardcore and really interesting guy.
So in a way, you're a military brat. You come from lineage of military. Not that this matters, but racially, ethnically, are you Irish or?
Yeah, like seriously, like it's probably 70 or 80% Irish. So
Okay,
I got English and German on my mom's side, but they also mixed with Irish people. So it's like
got it.
it's
So
probably
very
70 or
very
80% Irish.
Anglo, very waspy.
Euromut, but most of it is Irish,
Yeah,
and then a little touches of like English and German, which I think is pretty common for the
got it.
Northeast.
So I'm painting a picture in my head. All right.
Mhm.
So that lineage mattered a lot to you, or is it something that you grew up listening to war stories, or because you eventually will go to
Well,
the military? But so let's hear.
Well, this could be part of the compensation in my psychology
Mm-hmm.
is the only people who were down here were my paternal grandparents, and so I didn't know any of my extended family. I literally saw them during like summers or whatever. So I think it's almost like a partial compensation to be attached to like the military history a little bit, because I didn't know them particularly
Mm.
well. I actually only talked to my B-17 bombardier or navigator grandfather. I really only got, I don't want to say close to him, but I only talked to him aggressively maybe like 60 days before he passed. He was like,
Oh.
because I was deployed at the time, I was in Iraq, and he knew that he was going to pass, and so him and I just started like exchanging emails like crazy. And it was actually kind of sucked, because like we could have had this relationship the entire time, but just geography and time, and I think his PTSD, and I think it just all added up to the fact that we weren't close.
Yeah, and it was sort of that last flurry of communications. Was that something out of like, oh, I wanna make up for lost time kind of deal, or was it more like,
Yeah,
yeah,
he knew
important?
he
Yeah.
knew he was on his way out. And I was in the military, I was in the Marine Corps, I was in Iraq at the time, and so I think he saw like, oh, there's this entire part of my family that followed in my footsteps going into the military. I don't even talk to them. My grandson is currently deployed. Let me check in on him before I
Mm.
check out. And in a way, it was touching to have like your like a masculine role model like check in on you and see how you're doing and tell you some of his stories and all that kind of stuff. So it was good, but then obviously it's tragic too, because you didn't really know each other and then he passed.
Sure, yeah.
So
And not to, I guess my question is, first of all, do you have any siblings?
I have two siblings. I
Siblings,
have an
okay.
older and a younger brother.
Okay, so you're a middle child. Three boys.
Yes,
Awesome,
all
yeah.
boys.
Um, that was your father being an accountant. Um, there's a there's kind of a generational leap between the actual military service between your grandfather and you, and
Hmm.
it's a kind of, because oftentimes you will get the direct father son grandson, but they skip the generation. Um,
Hmm.
do you feel that like you and your grandfather, for the little that you discussed with him in the last 4 months, that was a connection that you didn't have necessarily with your father, or one that like,
Oh yeah, for sure.
yeah,
That's the thing. Like I my parents sometimes watch my show, so I want to be honest while still
yeah,
being um you know
it's not about a
not
lack of
not 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 too
connection.
personal,
Yeah,
but
sure, yeah.
yeah, so I think that in some ways, if I'm just doing an ad hoc therapy session, the the
I'm not your therapist. I don't want to be Dr.
no, I'm gonna
Cade.
get you. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna get you, Dr. Cade. So like, no. So what happened was, I think that I always wanted to prove something. My dad was, he was very busy. He worked really hard in order to make sure that we had a good life materially. But because of that, I think he was very busy.
Mm,
And so we didn't have a lot of conversations about life or death or philosophy or religion. We started having those conversations probably in the past 5 to 10 years, but we didn't have a lot of those conversations coming up, and so I felt like I was probably like stepping into what I thought a man was when I
yeah.
turned 18.
And that's when
Um,
you start. That's when you deployed, or that's when you went into basic training.
all
Or is
right,
that?
hold
Or,
on, hold on.
you don't have to answer
Let
that.
me catch you up. I'll catch you up. Let's jump a little bit. So I went to Belgium and I learned French. I went to a French lycée. I did that for 3 years. We moved to Texas, Plano, Texas.
Damn.
We were there for 2 years, and I went to a French lycée in Dallas, Texas. So I continued my education in French, and then when I went to middle school, because I think I was like sixth or seventh grade at the time, I went to Florida public school. We moved back to Central Florida, which is where I currently reside. And this is probably where I spent most of my time, both in childhood and in adulthood. And so when we came back, 9/11 happened. So I was like, holy shit, that's my
Mm.
Pearl Harbor. I was like, when Pearl Harbor happened, both
How
of
old
my
were you?
grandparents
You know,
enlisted.
9/11 is one of my earliest memories.
I was 13 or 14.
Yeah, so I was like 5 or 6,
Yeah.
and I want to hear about your experience, but just to give you a little touch base.
Well, actually,
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, did your parents or your guardians let you watch television that day?
Yes. So this is what I recall. I
Oh.
recall very strongly that I was in my parents' bedroom
Mm,
watching. Remember those big chunky TVs? Watching
yes.
one of those chunky TVs, and seeing the flames and remembering. I remember. Now this could be true or false. I had an aunt at the time who lived in the city, although maybe not. I remember the feeling of being concerned for my aunt who I thought lived in the city. Now, it could be
Mm.
the case that she didn't. We're still figuring out that chronology about when exactly it was. I have to track that down. But it goes to show you how movable memories. But I just have this very strong feeling of being worried and seeing the towers in flame, and it's one of my earliest formative memories. And I think what happened was my mom picked me up from school.
Mm.
I was doing both like pre-K and kindergarten at the time. I don't know why I was doing half kindergarten, half pre-K. Is that a thing? I guess it's a thing. But
Yeah.
I think I got picked up to see it, and I was like 5 or 6, and that's one of my earliest memories.
Bro, so the, our teachers were in so much shock
Mm,
about what was happening, and it was obviously such like a huge historic event that the closest thing to it was like the Challenger blowing up, like that which was a space shuttle blowing up that
yeah,
killed like half a dozen people. That's what people who were kind of like young in the 90s or 80s or whatever, whenever that happened, that's what they talk about. But with 9/11, the adults were in so much shock, they just left the televisions on. So here we are, like 13 or 14 years old, literally like staring at a burning building. I swear to God, this could be memories getting mixed up.
yeah.
But I swear to God, we were watching helicopter footage, and we saw the second plane come in as it came in. And then we watch people just like commit suicide for 3 or 4 hours. And like we're like in chemistry class, just watching American citizens on American soil commit suicide, jumping out of a flaming building in order to avoid getting burned to death because jumping into the cement is preferable.
It's so crazy how
That was
yeah. Go sorry.
insane.
How
No, that's it. It's crazy.
the 90s and the early aughts, there's an imagery to the kind of big events there that I feel like is almost lost. Maybe it's because of media these days, and
Mm,
the fact that everything is so fast that maybe iconic images are less of a thing. But think about Columbine, think
yeah,
about 9/11. These are incidents that almost sear this kind of collective memory that I think you have maybe a little bit with the Trump thing, with the Trump photo.
it did. That's an iconic image, but
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. Where that would have been the moment
Mm-hmm.
of this year or this half decade, and now it's like, oops.
And
It's like,
people forget about this era, and I remember it because I was growing up during in the aftermath of it, and I'm sure you remember it because you were in the thick of it, into the thick of it. Like, this was a time, I think you described it perfectly, that the parents were scared. If you think of the metaphor of I don't know, America as a person, I I know that there's a lot of these lost innocence narratives and stuff that like are problematic. America, how were you innocent after slavery? Are you innocent after all, like, the imperialism in Teddy Roosevelt
mm,
era, all that stuff? I hear that, but this felt like a seismic shift, a before after, and in the wake of that, fear
mhm.
was it felt like such a dominant thing. And reading about it afterwards, and being in school at the time when these wars had massive support, and because people were so scared, and I remember in 2004 when Bush got reelected, um, that I was just a little, what did I know, right? But remembering that, it's crazy, this dumb guy gets reelected. The country was so scared after 9/11, and that scar hasn't really ever left. Every time I go to the airport, every time I get on a plane, I think about 9/11. And that
Oh
kind of
yeah.
it worked as an attack. For certain, it didn't work obviously in the sense of like destroying a country, but in the sense of putting us in fear every day. When I'm ever thinking about flights, I think about 9/11. And it
Oh
had
yeah.
yeah.
I have horrible flight anxiety, and I know the stats, I know the
Yeah.
statistics,
I
I know all of that kind of stuff, and I'm like, I'm still in an aluminum tube doing 600 miles an hour through the sky. This is unnatural. And when I was in the military and I had to fly, like I would fly to Japan. That was like a 20-hour flight. But the reason why it didn't bug me was because like I had a job, I had a goal, I had a mission. If I'm just flying for fun, I'm like, why am I jumping into a metal tube death trap to have fun? And
Yeah.
I blame Osama bin Laden for that. Fuck you, Osama.
And so it's your Pearl Harbor. It's your wake up call. You're 13 or 14 at the
It
time,
is.
and so tell me what's in your mind. What? Because you're way older than I. You're not way. You're like 7 or 8.
I was a geopolitics and history nerd. I loved militaria. I loved vehicles. I loved technology. My parents would ground me whenever I wasn't doing something. Whenever I was screwing up at school or whatever. But they let me read. So here I am thinking that I'm like getting away with something because I'm like reading Lord of the Rings or historical books about the Persian Gulf War or historical books about World War II or something like that. I think I'm getting away with something. And my parents are just like letting me read endless amounts of history. So it was huge. I try to be casual about it because I know how many massive historical events have happened throughout time, but it was also crazy being a part of a massive historical moment. And I pretty much knew by the time I was like 15 or 16 and I saw troops dropping into Iraq, I was like,
You want to deploy.
I'm signing up. I'm signing up for sure.
And did you see the lack of connect? So officially, for those of you aware, the war in Iraq didn't have to do with necessarily, although there were implications to that about, who knows if they're funding Al Qaeda. There's someone who visited, high-ranking Al Qaeda member visited Iraq.
Wait, is it Zarqawi or was it somebody else?
It's someone. I forget. It might be him. It might be him. I think he died sometime.
I think it's Zarqawi,
yeah.
but I'll Google it. It's not a big deal. I just want to prove that.
But the official reason had to do with the threat of nuclear weapons and weapons of destruction and all that stuff. Did you see the lack of connection to the 9/11 in the sense of the immediate sense as any kind of cognitive dissonance in your head, or was it more a general feeling, this is America and we are under threat by them, and so I need to go over there, and without a kind of specific there and without a specific connection to the thing that happened?
I didn't know shit about Middle Eastern and North African geopolitics.
Sure, yeah.
Like that was actually one of the funniest things. I was we're jumping ahead a little bit, but I was getting out of the military. And I was trying to like chronologize like my experiences. It was basically like a autobiography, diary, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized when I was reading the edits is that I used Arab, Muslim, Afghan,
interchangeably,
and I was like,
Yeah.
oh shit, this is terribly inaccurate. And I realized like how often people around me had used it in that way. And so I was like, hold on. I don't know shit about the like ethnic differences between Afghans and, Arab Muslims. And I also barely know. The only thing that I knew is that Sunni and Shia were killing the shit out of each other. That's the only thing that I knew about like Sunni and Shia Islam. And so it was kind of crazy going through that. But to answer your question directly, I didn't see the disconnect because I just figured like jihadism is probably an international problem. And then when it came to the weapons of mass destruction, since then, I've done research that I feel like I understand Rumsfeld and Cheney's position. I think they're evil men.
Interesting.
But I think that they had a geopolitical rationale for why they did what they did.
Do you feel personally misled by those men?
Yes, but I'm not bitter about it, I guess.
Yeah, because there's speaking of Twitch politics, and we will come back for a second. I'm gonna put Cenk Uygur in that box for a second because he's, in a sense, he's just like the great progenitor Hassan, perhaps even more so. That was YouTube politics back in 2006, 7, 8. I don't know if people remember. Young Turks have been around for a while, and I remember in that era him pointing and be like, 60% of people, 70% of people think that Saddam Hussein ordered 9/11 or something like that. There was like some statistic there, and
no, that's still true. That's still true. Like go to like a beach in LA and be like, hey, what happened with the war in Iraq? And they'd be like, didn't they bomb us on 9/11 or some shit? Like people say that still.
And it will tie back in towards, I think, towards the Trump stuff and Sitch that hopefully we'll get to at some point in the latter part of the conversation. But it was not in vogue necessarily to be anti these wars. People for like now it's kind of passe to be like this war was a mistake. All the Republicans are saying. So go ahead.
Oh no, no, I wasn't trying to interrupt. I was kind of agreeing with
Mm-hmm.
you. But I was surprised when we invaded Iraq because the media was actually like fairly critical, where they felt like the case was pretty weak, and also the international community was giga critical of
Of
like the
Iraq.
United States. Yeah, going
Yeah.
into Iraq, like they were like, UN is not sanctioning this. America, you're doing it alone. You can do whatever in Afghanistan. We think that's justified, but basically you're on your own in Iraq. And then Bush came up with the axis of evil, which a lot of people hated. They thought that was like one of the most messed up political things that ever came out.
Well, you know
And
who
then
came
also,
up with that actually?
who?
It was Bush. It's one of his
Yeah,
speechwriters. Wait, is it David Frum? Hang on, I'm just
I
gonna look
wouldn't
it
be
up.
surprised.
It was it David
But
Frum. Someone tell.
but also
Yes,
the
he did.
coalition of the willing. Coalition of the willing was another like a hot top or
Yeah,
hot I don't know what you would call it, like a phrase, the coalition of the willing, which was like all the countries that were willing to go in with the United States just because they liked the United States, but
sure. Yeah.
not with UN sanction. He got like 60
Australia.
countries.
Shout out Australia.
Tonga,
People
the Kingdom of Tonga.
people need to remember America's friends. Just for a second, a little digression here. I
Yeah.
think in the order of friendship here,
Mm.
it's maybe Australia and Canada and UK. Australia, Canada, UK. I know are my top three. I would say historically, maybe we put France in there, but they're a little bit too to be the best friend right now. But Australia, Canada, and UK, those are our homies. Those are our boys and girls and non-binaries. But like, yes, there were not a huge coalition that went to Iraq, but we dragged some of our best friends there. And I know they're very bitter about that sometimes. I was going to ask you before we get into your specific service. Do you look back on that as oftentimes so people in World War II could often go back and like say, this is what I, even if I had some minor role, even if I did this or that, I did something. I had a good cause. Do you look back with bitterness and say, I'm not sure what I was doing there, or why was I there?
No. See, it's like it's like the meme of it's like the bell curve,
Yeah,
where it's like the war on terror is justified, and it's like the idiot, and then it's like the midwit, and the midwit is like the war on terror was evil and was based on a lie, and then it's like the war on terror was justified, and it's like the 160 IQ guy. And so no, it's not. What's up, baby? You need me? Like now?
I can filibuster.
Okay.
Don't worry. Or if you have
Yeah,
to go,
can
that's
you?
fine. Yeah, no problem. Take your time.
I'll DM you in a second.
Take your time. Yeah, take all your time in the world. That was Mrs. Points. It's actually a crazy little appearance by Mrs. Points because Mrs. Points is very funny on Twitter, and she deserves a follow from y'all. I hope you guys find any of this interesting. I don't know why, but there was just something. I feel that I get in these conversations, and I can be very. You guys know me, very like single-minded in the arguments, and you saw a little bit of that on the actual Justice Warrior thing, and you lose a little bit of the humanity. And there was a moment in time a few months ago, I thought that of Connor. Like I said, I had that epiphany when I woke up in the middle of the night. Not homosexual, very straight. It was a purely professional thing. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Liberal surrender hands. But I felt it again, God, this week where I was like, I just yelled at Connor. And like he's a real person. And so I have these kind of like Jekyll and Hyde moments with myself a little bit in this space where I feel that maybe I'm not coming across as a real human being because I'm not treating or seeing other people as human beings. I'm just seeing them more as like, oh, we're going to debate or we're going to talk about this thing. And I don't know. I don't know if people enjoy the side of me when I'm not in that mode, or I'm just like, and I think that people will start to see me as kind of just like a shill or whatever if all I do is that.
Okay.
But yeah. By the way, if there's ever anything that you need to like totally, do not worry about that.
Yeah, I would say we're probably good, but I have to keep the kids down.
Yeah.
And so if my older boy gets up again, I might either need to shoo him back into his room, or if he gets really fussy, I might need to help put him to bed.
Yeah.
But wherever we're at,
We
we
were
can
at
like
the following. We were.
pause and
Oh, sorry.
come back to it at a later time. God forbid we can't finish tonight.
Got it. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, you were setting the rules just there, but where we were at was kind of like your take, um, backwards
Yeah,
looking at the role
is the war on terror justified? So
specifically. And do you feel any kind of way about it as you look back?
I feel bad for um I see American soldiers as kids. I really do. And so I feel bad. I think there's a bunch of kids who got lied to about what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, they thought they were sacrificing themselves for some, country music song, truth, justice, the American way, apple pie, strippers, Jack Daniels, like name like all the American things. They think that they're dying for that, but they're dying for something completely different. And I think the completely different thing is justifiable, but you should tell the truth if you're going to get people to die for you.
And so that's why maybe you don't blame Bush, or maybe you do.
I think Rumsfeld and Cheney
Rumsfeld
were
and Cheney. Okay.
way more intentional about what they were doing. I think Bush largely was unaware, and then they took advantage of his zeal to get what they wanted.
You kind of see Bush in a way, and this is kind of wild. I don't know if this
I don't
is
think he's stupid. I don't think he's stupid.
but you kind of see him as a pawn, or maybe even a victim of his own administration.
Yeah. And just to clarify this, so
because people will get angry at that. They'll say you're infantilizing him, you're removing responsibility for certain things. But sorry,
well,
I just want to give you the ability to be nuanced.
There's a wild and cool history here.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a book called The Art of Intelligence by Henry Crumpton. I actually really do like reading, by the way. I don't read as much as I used to because I watch stupid drama shows now. But there's an excellent book called The Art of Intelligence by Henry Crumpton, and it's wild because he talks about how he was investigating Al Qaeda 2 years before the USS Cole, which up until then was a big deal because that was a American destroyer getting suicide bombed by jihadists, and it killed I don't know, a few dozen people. And so while it was just the military, so people didn't care because it happened over there. It was a big deal for the intelligence community.
Yeah, there was an embassy bombing too, right? I forget where that was.
Oh yeah, Nairobi, Kenya.
Okay,
yep. If somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Nairobi was before that as well. I think that was like 98. And so Al Qaeda was getting ready, and they were practicing and getting better and better. And so this guy he was high up enough that he went to Donald Rumsfeld and he said, "Hey, Al Qaeda is serious. They're going to come for us. They're going to do some significant damage, and we need to be taking it seriously." And this was like before Bush technically took office. He was trying to get them spun up. And so Rumsfeld said, "Come back to me when you can tie it to Iraq," which tells me Rumsfeld and Cheney were already trying to find a way to into Iraq before 9/11.
And you view that largely as a geostrategic, some might say extractive or neo-imperialistic kind of deal, or was it revenge for Bush Senior, or all of that?
They were trying to finish the first Persian Gulf War.
There you go. Okay.
So what had happened for the uninitiated or the historically ignorant? We largely took over like global security, and in particular like oil and petroleum. That's like the lifeblood of the civilized world. And so we took over and helped the English maintain the Shah in Iran. So I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can be.
You're starting with the Shah and you're going to go away, but no, I love it.
Yeah. So Mossadegh, somebody yelled at me in a comment section for forgetting who Mossadegh was, but there was like a lefty socialist man of the people who wanted to nationalize oil. The Brits said no. And so in concert with the CIA and British Special Forces, they eliminated Mossadegh, and they kept the Shah of Iran, who was the king.
Western and the king favored. Those you get. Have you ever seen The Sopranos?
Yeah.
You know who's the guy with the eyebrows? He died. But you know what I'm talking about? They called him the Shah.
Pauly?
No.
Oh, no. Guys, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's
Phil
the
Leotardo,
main
Phil Leotardo, but I
Phil
don't know. But
Leotardo,
what's his
dude.
actor's
Yeah,
name?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but the Shaw looked like him. He was pro-Western in a way. He was trying to increase literacy, but he was a dictator, an autocrat, anti-liberal in his own country in a way, in the sense of
He had
democratic
some
institutions.
Western secular cultural reforms, but if you talk shit about him, then he's going to throw you into a dungeon and pull out your toenails with pliers. So, not a great guy, but overall still Western friendly. And so, what happened was in the 79 revolution, the Islamists took over. Saddam Hussein uh, decided to try to take some Iranian oil fields. And so he started fighting the Iranians. Well, the Iranians weren't as disorganized and stupid as Saddam thought. And so Iran starts kicking the shit out of Iraq, borderline about to kick Saddam's ass.
America
The
starts funding
problem,
both sides of the war. Ronald Reagan, our good friend, and you would still
Ronald
call
Reagan,
yourself a Reaganite Republican, wouldn't you?
I wouldn't know.
Oh, you
He's
wouldn't. Okay.
he's pro gun control. He's giga fiscal conservative.
California
Um,
Republican.
Yeah,
So,
the only thing that I kind of agree with him on is like strong militarism, but he's not even a fiscal conservative. He
so
spent
that's
more money
odd.
than.
If I had to associate you with any president, it might even just be George Bush, but I don't, or maybe just George Bush Senior,
No, I honestly, I wish I could be associated with George Bush minus the whole global war on terror
which is a big
blunder,
part of the
right?
thing.
That's like his entire legacy. The person that I think I admire the most, who at least claims Republican, is Teddy
Teddy
Roosevelt.
Roosevelt. But that's
Yeah,
that's
but the
another generation of Republic. That's a
it
I
is.
and it's a kind of anachronistic. It wouldn't even fit on to modern day politics, though you as though sorry, though you may try to make it map on with your
I wish I could.
expansionist
Yeah,
ways.
no, I wish I could. He's the guy who's famous for speak softly, carry a big stick. He was very pro having like American influence within our sphere of the Americas.
Also
He
shot
built
in a
up
presidential campaign.
shot in a presidential campaign, kept talking anyways. I think the Panama Canal was a big part of his initiative as well, which is one of the things that helped make America like America was already going to be a commercial hub, but it helped solidify us as a commercial hub. So he was a visionary,
All right,
but
let's get
like
to Kuwait.
he
Bring us to Kuwait.
okay, sorry,
My
Kuwait.
bad.
So Iraq. So Iraq is losing the war against Iran, and what's most interesting about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that was the justification for the 2003 war, is that we are the people who sold him the weapons. So if you check something out called the Riegel Report, Riegle, we sold dual use technologies like anthrax, botulism, precursors for VX gas, precursors for like all sorts of horrible weapons of mass destruction. And we sold them to Saddam. And even after he used them on Shiite rebels and Kurds in his country, we continued to sell him those weapons because he could not lose the war against Iran. And so we're partially complicit in like you'll always see like the massacre of the Kurds used as a moral justification for why we needed to take out Saddam. We sold him those weapons.
It,
And
and it's a little bit removed
sorry.
in time as well from the
Mhm.
2003. People call that a genocide or an attempted genocide, because the aim there seemed to be explicitly to wipe out parts of the Kurds who've always been kind of
They
an
never bent the knee
independent
to the central
streak,
government.
yeah, and that's so interesting because it was during that time period, isn't it, that the relationship soured with the West somewhat, especially given the Iran Contra affair and other things that occurred in that moment. But you're getting us to Kuwait, I'm sure, because and tell me if I'm wrong here. Iraq had some help from Kuwait or lent on some since had some either loans or something to Kuwait. Is that true?
Well, with Kuwait, you might be better versed on that
Mm,
than me. As far as I know, maybe I'm reading the Americanized propaganda,
no, no.
but the Americanized propaganda is that Iraq argued that Kuwait was tapping into
It's
some of their
all, yeah.
oil fields and used that as a casus belli in order to seize Kuwait. And Kuwait's like a very small country, so they didn't have the means to defend themselves. And then because
But oil rich.
uh, yeah, they're oil rich because they invaded Kuwait, because Iraq told us to screw ourselves, because Iraq threw Scud missiles at Israel, who is one of our allies, and because they got pissed off at us when they found out that we were playing both sides of the Iran-Iraq conflict or whatever. And Saddam soured on us and started leaning more, I think, Soviet. we were like, screw this guy, we're going to jack him up. And so that's what happens in the first Gulf War. But we don't have enough Arab support from the Gulf states to go into Iraq to depose Saddam. And so it's kind of left as this festering wound where we kicked Iraq out of Kuwait, but we still have a despot. He's Sunni. 30% of the population is Sunni. 70% of it is Shia. He threatens Israel. He threatens Saudi Arabia. He threatens Kuwait. He threatens Iran.
His own people.
This is where a majority of the world's oil is reliable oil, because Venezuela has a shitload of oil, but it's not reliable. Is produced, and so we just have this like
It's a key
rabid dog.
state. It's next to Iran. It's a historical, one of the most historically rich areas in world history. And you say in the middle of that inferno, I want to go there. What the hell?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, listen, man, you got to if history doesn't happen in like, Appalachia,
So what made you what
it
made you want to
happens
go
in
there?
what made me want to go there?
Yeah, I'm
Well,
not
I
judging you, by the
saw
way. I just want to know.
no, I no, I saw 3,000 Americans butchered on live television for reasons I didn't understand, and I said I want to be a part of this. It's a moment of history.
That's so interesting. So you would say 9/11 was the reason you went to Iraq as a direct
I
cause.
I probably would have ended up doing some form of law enforcement or first responder service as a part of my life just because I felt called to do that anyways. But yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So let's take away from the macro and let's focus in on you. Let's enter into
Mm.
Connor. Connor is gone to these French schools. He's 16. He knows more or less that he wants to join. 9/11 just happened. What do your parents think? What's going on in your family?
Oh, they hate it.
They hate it. Yeah,
Oh,
they don't.
they hate it so much.
Yeah.
So enlisting in the military and dying in foreign wars, that's for poor people, right? So,
Mm.
my parents aren't like crazy rich, but they work nice jobs. They have 4-year degrees. They've worked really hard in order to get where they got. And so to have a kid, they were like, if you're going to do the military at all, you need to get a college degree and commission as an officer. And I was like, I don't have the time. I don't have the grades. I don't have the discipline. I'm not doing that. I'm enlisting. And also, I got in a lot of trouble. I think subconsciously I knew I was going to be going into the military because I just started smoking a lot of reefer and drinking a lot of alcohol and partying and
In high
chasing a
school?
lot of, yeah, in high school. And like chasing a lot of girls. And my grades dropped as a result, and I got asked to leave the school that I was going to. I didn't get
In
expelled.
high
I got
school?
asked to leave.
The private
And
school.
private school. Yeah. So I got in trouble at homecoming for drinking at the public school. My parents sent me
Ooh.
to a Catholic private school to set me on the straight and narrow. I did good for a semester. Then I started doing whatever I wanted to do again. Then I got in trouble for smoking reefer at the Catholic school. They asked to search my car off campus. I said, "You got a warrant?" And they said, "No." And then I
And
said,
then you
"You're not
became a
searching my car."
cop. Wow, that's so funny. So you were
Yeah.
that's a troubled kid. That's a bit of a troubled
Oh, I
kid.
was very, very angry pothead. Yes. Yeah.
Wow. And what was the source of that anger? Was it just general teenage angst, or was it related to what was going on, or is it a combination, or can you even track it?
No, I think it's a combination thereof.
Yeah.
My parents are very religious. I am not a religious literalist, and so I think that traveling, whatever you call this existence, this life, trying to figure out like a sense of meaning when you're 16 or 17, you've seen people butchered on live television for historical reasons you can barely comprehend. You yourself might die in the next few years in armed conflict because you're going to volunteer to go to the armed conflict. And then you have all these adults trying to make you do dumb stuff like school, you know,
Did you play
buzz off like
sports or not
a
really?
little bit. I did crew, so that's like rowing.
Yeah.
So I rowed for the high school that I was a part of. Both high schools I rowed for, and it was okay. It wasn't
I
it
have a
wasn't
theory, and
crazy.
I don't know if this is true, and you have kids, so you know
Mm.
better. That team sports is not a perfect way to keep kids out of trouble, but it's a decent way to, because oftentimes I think the kids will inevitably like find ways to get themselves into things. But I think that idle hands are the devil's. What's the phrase?
Yeah, devil's playthings. No,
Yeah, yeah.
100%. And my parents did their best, but I just think it was too much, right? Like
Mm.
the accumulation of my intelligence, my lack of interest in school, my heavy interest in history, and then just world events colliding into this kaleidoscope of craziness. They couldn't stop me. And so as a result, I got asked to leave my private high school. I went to a technical high school. So I went to a high school where there were like 40-year-old crackheads who had just gotten clean, and they were doing like self-paced testing in order to get out of high school or get a GED. And so I did the self-paced high school program. I graduated in 2 weeks, and then I actually graduated boot camp the day that my friends graduated high school.
And so you were 17 in boot camp.
I had just turned 18 in
Okay.
November.
That is fascinating. So, because it's kind of like from these very Belgium school kind of, I would almost say, touching upper middle class style upbringing.
My
To
parents are thoroughly disappointed that I didn't go to BU
yeah, because
or
sure,
UPenn.
yeah,
Like I should have gone to BU or UPenn, but I didn't.
and that's so like interesting that in you really went to a more kind of blue collar situation, both in the tech school and the going to boot camp as a grunt style thing. It's not like you were a West Point
My
candidate
parents
or
hated
anything.
it.
Yeah, yeah. So you kind of had the opportunity perhaps to
Yeah, but do
embrace.
do you know
Yeah,
do you know where that came from though?
tell me.
Republicanism, right? Because Republicans are all about the we love the working man, and you got to get the dirt into your fingernails, and you got to make it
Sure.
on your own, and you got to do this, and
Nowadays,
you got to
and
do that.
there was a lot of that back then because talk radio was really taking off, and I think that was a
Yeah,
big thing back then. But there was still
gotta
that
make
kind
it
of
on
like
your own.
there was still that kind of like mid-Atlantic. Who's this guy? He's the National Review founder. Oh my God, what's his name? He's a very waspy guy. He's a
Mm.
Republican thinker. Someone help me out. He has that accent. Oh my God, Buckley.
Yeah.
That style Republican was still around. You
It's
still
no,
had a
it's
lot of that.
true. It's true, and those are my parents' friends, right? So those are my parents' friends
Right, right.
or liberals, right?
Yeah.
And there are very elite like liberals. Like I have cousins who I told that I was like in the Marine Corps as an enlisted person, and I was a patrol officer in law enforcement, and you can just see like their nose just like cant up like 10 or 20 degrees because that's peasant work, right?
Yeah, no.
So
It makes me think about our recent conversations, or maybe your recent conversations with people like Rob Norm, and I'm going to
mm,
touch base, and we are going to go back to personal. But if you take out Connor as ideologue, Connor as philosopher, Connor as thinker, Connor as political theorist, and you put in Connor as the person Connor, and you say,
mhm,
why isn't Connor supporting Donald Trump? This party is literally
mm.
unrecognizable to the party he grew up in. The party
Oh,
is literally not what he grew up with. And now the party is kind of dominated by forces that would have been in the outs when Connor was in his formative years. And so Connor sees this party, and of course he's going to reject it. This is not what he knows. And so if you put aside the kind of theorizing, and look at you as a kind of, I don't know, you're the output of a bunch of inputs related to forces out of your control, and you, I guess, put aside the thinking part of it. I think it's totally understandable why someone might be like
oh,
intuitively put out of sorts by that.
well, and that's the thing too, is when I was growing up, like I had shitloads of friends who were liberals. They all smoked pot and, hated racism and whatever liberals did in the thousands. I don't remember. But the point is they'd be like, "Oh, the Republicans are a bunch of retarded hick bigots and all this kind of shit." And I was like, my parents are like well-educated fiscal conservatives who could break down like every economic policy and probably maybe I'm giving them a little bit too much credit here, but like geopolitical happening in the entire 20th century.
Mm.
And they will give you principled reasons why philosophically they're Republicans. And they root that in fiscal conservatism, social conservatism, like a whole bunch of things, because they're also super Christian. And so I was like, that's not the party or who I understand to be the Republican Party. But I was wrong because half of the party are the people that my former liberal friends were talking shit about. But it sucks for me because
Mm.
I don't, the team that I play for, uh, is very, I don't want to say it's small, but it's like 35% of the party. It's not powerful enough to carry the weight.
I think you even maybe overestimate it, but that's it's fascinating to me the tensions there, because you have the liberal friends, you have the traditional style New England Republicans, kind of overseeing you in a way, at least maybe at this point in your life, that you find off-putting or burdensome, or maybe obnoxious
There
slash yeah.
Well, see, and here's the other thing with being ethnically Irish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the other thing is 200 years ago, according to what I can understand from history, my family was potato eating, bog dweller, insurgent rebels against the English crown. That's who they were,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
They were like rebels, salt of the earth, alcoholics who probably
The
punched their wife
original
in the face.
IRA.
Well, right, and then not just that. When they came to America, a lot of people didn't want to hire Irish people. There were a bunch of these swarthy, illiterate masses of Catholics who are loyal to the Pope more than they are their new country, right? But they basically bootstrapped it. I know that's a meme, but they bootstrapped it by being firefighters and cops and military service members, and then that's how they found their place in the working and middle class. Both of my grandparents, I think my parents corrected me that one of them didn't get a college degree, but he still became an optometrist,
Yeah.
and then the other one did get a college degree, and that was partially because of his family.
Mm-hmm.
But up until that point, like within a generation or two, we had people who didn't have high school levels of education. So we came from the earth. We weren't always these upper middle class snobs. And so
Which is one of the reasons I have a bone to pick with your good friend Lauren Southern,
mm,
which I think that viewed from a contemporary lens, there's repetition here. There's a pattern here, which are this clutch of individuals who arrived on a boat, and who are
they're
assuredly,
swarthy
yeah,
and wrong
not,
religion
yeah,
and mistrusted and
and yet look at
violent
you
and
now. A few generations later, you are bucking against the kind of elitist trends of an establishment, or a pseudo establishment that your parents are not part of, to go and die for your country. And
yeah.
we don't have to linger on mass migration, all that stuff, but that is it is a profound commitment to America as your home. Maybe historically you view it as conceptually this beacon, shining beacon or whatever, but that's what your goal was. Your goal was to go
Oh,
and fight and die for your
can you
country.
ask? Yeah, can you ask anything else of a person? And the answer is absolutely not. That's actually part of the reason. I think that's almost been an immunization for me in the Twitch and YouTube political space, because the dissident right wing and the right wing, obviously, they hold a lot of sway, a lot of money, a lot of influence on specifically on the online sphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think they got pushed out of the mainstream, but they'll always have race realist or 1350 or anti-black or anti-Hispanic or anti-Muslim and North African. And there's parts of those criticisms of those communities that I can totally get on board with, but I can't be permanently bigoted against the immutable characteristic of belonging to one of these ethnicities or language groups or religions, because in the military I had every single one of those demographic groups represented in the people that I would go across the world to fight and die with. So it's like,
Mm.
do Muslims sometimes commit like a disproportionate amount of jihadist terrorist attacks? They sure do.
Of
Do I
jihadist
know a lot
attacks,
of
I
cool,
would say that they represent a lot of jihadist attacks.
well,
Yes.
terrorist attacks?
Got it. Yeah.
So but are there also like cool Muslims who basically they're trying to do the right thing and they're willing to sacrifice their lives in order to make the world a better place? And the
Sure.
answer
Yeah.
is obviously yes.
Yeah. It's to me, it's also fascinating. Um, you are sort of speaking about race not being this consideration, or I don't know, background, ethnicity. It's not something that or are you saying it's something you were conscious of, or something that you were ignorant of, or agnostic to, or just indifferent to?
Yeah, I would say I had like a really liberal mentality because my
Mm,
parents are obviously they're Northeastern Republicans, right?
yeah,
So like racism is not cool
it
in
doesn't
the
happen
Northeast.
in the Northeast. Boston is one of the
Okay.
most racist sports towns that there is, of course.
But
And listen, let's go from a
listen,
Celtics fan. There's a big
if an
racism.
Irish Listen, if an Irish guy is talking shit to you on the street, you get into a fist fight, you beat the fuck out of each other, and then you wipe each other off and you say, have a good fucking night, right? Like
Hmm.
it's
Tell
not
us
like
about how Teddy
murder.
Roosevelt is your favorite president.
It's not like murder racism, you know? It's like hooligan racism. But
Got it. Okay.
anyways,
All right.
it's the cute racism.
So you're committed to this, and you decide I'm gonna go to boot camp. You're 18 and you deploy. You don't have a girlfriend.
Mm,
Oh,
I did.
at the
I
time.
did. We broke up at like I was lucky enough that she was nice enough to stay with me during boot camp,
Hmm.
but after boot camp, I just kind of knew how intense it was going to be,
Yeah.
and we broke up, and it was horrible,
Oh,
horrible,
did you meet her at the
horrible.
Catholic place or at the tech school, or probably not a lot of women at the
No,
tech
weirdly enough, it was just like
in
it
and
was just like
around.
friend of a friend party
Yeah.
thing, and she was really cool, really interesting, all that kind of stuff. But I just knew that if I'm on the other side of the world, I'm doing whatever I'm doing. I'm gone for 7 months at a time. She's a young girl. She's good looking, whatever. You know, she's gonna move on eventually. You know, she was going to college, and so I didn't want to be like
And you
the
were such a
boyfriend.
catch. I'm just
I
joking.
no. See, here's the funny thing about it is I did think I was a catch,
You're a
but at the same
catch.
time, one of my friends was like, "Well, what's so fucking special about you?" And I was like, "Oh, you're right. I'm a huge dick. Like, I have I have flaws."
And
So,
you
anyways,
will let us know when Mrs. Points enters the story, won't you?
oh sure,
Yeah.
sure. But the anyways, so we I actually go to Japan. So
Awesome. Oh, you
so
didn't like Japan.
boot camp's awesome. Combat training is horrible, but I learn a lot of really cool things. I train with some of the veterans from Fallujah, so the guys who like
Mm,
went and
yeah.
kicked doors and killed people with like bulldozers and grenades and rifle fire and all that kind of stuff. It's awesome talking to those guys. And then I go to my schoolhouse, and it ends up being an administrative job. And I signed up for an administrative job because I was raised as a pacifist by my parents, so I didn't really
Huh.
want to kill anyone. But
You wanted to serve
the
your
Marine
country.
Corps the Marine Corps brainwashes you to think that killing someone is like the highest level of like what you can do as a human being. Like infantry is the shit. Killing someone is the shit. Pink mist, blowing stuff up, hitting people with claymores, calling in airstrikes, running and gunning, clearing rooms. Like all of that was propagandized to me for, I don't know, probably, I guess all 4 years to be the coolest thing in the world.
And you did want to be a
Uh,
Marine.
yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
I went to the recruiting station. I probably should have joined the Air Force in retrospect. But the recruiting station, I saw an Air Force veteran and he was skinny. I saw two Army guys and they had beer bellies and they were smoking cigarettes. And then I saw a Marine and the Marine was like jacked and fit and looked like he could f me up. And I was like, I want the real military. So I'm gonna go do the real military. And that's why I joined the Marine Corps.
The Marine was an Adonis, and I couldn't look away, so I joined the
It's
Marines.
true. Staff Sergeant McCaskill. I still remember his name.
Oh,
He was 25 at the time. He could run like an 18-minute 3 mile. He could do 20 pull-ups. He
and
could do
just a
100. You know,
piece of ass.
seriously. I mean, like I'm not into black dudes, but if you're into black dudes, he was top. You know, he was a 10. He was
Yeah,
easily an 8. Like no bullshit. Like
got
I'm
it.
not even gay, but he was a good looking dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, you
Sorry,
joined
you
the
want to keep
Marines.
talking about Staff Sergeant
No, it's okay.
McCaskill?
We can go to
You want me to
Japan.
look him up?
Yeah, yeah. Let's get on the ringer here. Maybe he's following.
Okay,
Have you ever
okay.
thought about like whether some of your like military friends
Yeah, like
see
former
your
veteran
shit?
bros.
Yeah.
So, some of my friends do, but
Okay.
it's not a big deal.
So
They're not as nerdy as I am.
you're deployed in Japan, but
The
you have this kind of like indoctrination to be a killer.
Yes, although I have a person other than grunt job, which honestly I'm a sensitive fella, so that's probably good for my psychology,
Yeah.
anyways. So I go to Japan. I'm told I'm never going to deploy, which is depressing to me because like getting to Iraq is like
It's a
the
goal of
pinnacle of
yours.
what you want to do. Yeah. And what ends up happening was the people in Japan got so annoyed that only stateside units were deploying because we had to be there in case Korea popped off, which it never did.
It
Uh,
always could though. Thanks for the raid.
yeah. So what ended up happening was they stand up a unit to go to Iraq, and I was told on my 19th birthday that I'm going to Iraq. So it's
On
like, oh shit.
you're 19 and
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
about to
yeah.
be shipped
I
out.
turned 19, broke up with my girlfriend, brokenhearted. It's been a year. I'm propagandized that I'm this killer. I need to go to the war and shoot people in the face. I'm doing this paperwork job. And then I get told, and like, I'm like, yeah, man, I really wish I could deploy. And then on my 19th birthday, they're like, you're deploying, bitch. And I'm like, oh,
What were your
it's like,
feelings?
oops.
Were you conflicted? Because what you're telling me now is you have these kind of like contradicting or at least values at tension. You have the pacifism from, I guess, that you've been raised with,
From my parents.
very French of you. And then you also have this kind of teenage angst that's a little directionless. And then you have this kind of very purposely directed killer instinct
Marine
that's
Corps
been ingrained.
propaganda.
Yeah. So what's
Yeah.
going through your head? I mean, it's kind of a clash of
Like,
doctrines, thoughts, emotions, right? I assume.
I was like, you've been talking a lot of shit. You better not be a pussy.
Oh, did you view that as like
it's been
a masculine thing, or did you view it as like a values thing, or maybe both?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So like, the dying in war is actually probably pretty easy. Like you just get hit by something you barely see, it fucks you up, and then you die, right? Killing in war is probably a little bit harder because it involves like controlling your adrenaline and focusing on the enemy and killing them and all that kind of stuff. But Marines in particular, and I think military personnel, particularly infantry, they focus on like it's a value set of, can you perform in the worst scenario imaginable for a human being? And if you can, you're a hero. You're GI Joe. You're someone who should be worshipped, because the enemy came for you. They tried to kill you. You try to kill them back. You killed them. You survived. Now you move on. So again, it's like this is the pinnacle of human experience that somebody can achieve. And so you want that. You want to taste that. It's almost like a form of virginity, with like the way that people perceive like having sex and like all that kind of stuff, and like busting your cherry and all that kind of stuff. A lot of those analogies carry over to the way that Marines and infantry in particular view killing people.
It
And
reminds me a little bit about we were talking a bit about the Irish. It made me think of Gangs of New York because everyone thinks about that. But making your bones, right? It almost feels like a lot of these masculine oriented organizations, whether that's teenage boys, whether that's military, whether that's the mafia, there's this notion of making your bones, doing the thing, initiation, so that you have the respect of your boys. So I guess
I mean, coming of age and being a part of the tribe, and then being not just being a part of the tribe, being a valued member of the tribe.
Yeah.
Because not only can you perform to help out the mission, quote unquote, whatever that is, but you went into the harshest environment possible and performed well. That's the peak.
So is it fair to say that you're happy to go to Iraq?
No,
You're scared.
Like, I was too angry and angsty to be scared. I should have been scared, but I was too angry. Just because I was like 19, pissed off, broke up with my girlfriend, other side of the world, all that kind of shit. So I should have been scared, but I was angry. And then I deploy, and then deployment actually was pretty cool for me. So I go to the biggest base in Iraq. It's called Al Assad. So it's like the chillest base in Iraq. It's in the Sunni Triangle. So there is like a lot of violence that was around us. But actually, when I showed up in 2007, 2008. This was during the surge. So what happens is the units that I get deployed with are so overwhelming. And there were diplomatic overtures to the Sunni at that time, where they were like, George Bush basically told his commanders, and his commanders told the Sunni, hey, you secure your territory, you bring it to as peaceful as you can, you stop attacking American troops, and we will figure out a way to withdraw. And so the insurgents go from trying to kill us all the time to trying to keep things as chill as possible so the Americans will leave.
And I'm gonna pull out for a second real quick, and then you can give your commentary on what I'm about to say. Fair to say that Saddam Hussein was a Sunni leader overseeing a Shiite majority in an at least on paper secular Ba'athist party, and the administration, that is the George Bush administration, had a policy of
Ification.
And so the logic of the Sunnis being the kind of hotspot initially is that they're the kind of ones who are now put out. So they're the ones who are threatened by a Shia majority, and they're the ones who you need to make sure are sort of following the line. What do you think, A, of that dynamic that I described? Do you agree with it? Or B, the policy of debothification as opposed to, hey, let's keep some of these people in here to make everything kind of functionally work?
See, I think that this was rotten wood supporting the entire superstructure of the national government of Iraq.
Mm.
And so you couldn't keep all the Sunni in their positions of power or whatever in order to maintain a semblance of, supervisory government. Because and this is from like books I've read after the fact and general impressions and all that kind of stuff. But the Sunni, the way that they ruled, because they're only 30% of the population, was largely through authoritarian
A
measures.
republic of fear is what it's been
Yeah,
described as.
they would execute people, they would torture people, they would kidnap people, they would do whatever. And so you can't keep those people because they're and have them be legitimate because they're torturers and murderers and rapists and like all this kind of stuff.
So you agreed largely with
So
the policy of debothification. There's one question real quick if you can answer it from the chat from Joanna. Did you did you love Iraq? Because historically, Joanna, that's one of the places she most wants to go to. And that's not ironic. She really does want to go to Iraq.
No, I didn't enjoy Iraq. I enjoyed what I did in Iraq. So I'm sure there's like beautiful parts of the country. People have talked to me about like, going to Baghdad or Haditha Dam or, going to Mosul or hanging out with the Kurds or I don't know what attracts you to Iraq. But I'll just tell you, for me, it was like being in Arizona as far as like what you can picture, right? There's no orange tint. There's no yellow tint. There's no Arab person singing like in the background. I only saw camels a couple of times. So like your mirage movie image stereotype of what an Arab country is, it's not. It's Arizona with a bunch of Arabs.
Okay, I've been very non-judgmental for this entire. I tried to be. I'm going to offer. This is not me judging you. It's me offering a critique of the broader situation here. So you just made a comparison. You said, whatever, Iraq. I get it. That's you're genuinely reflecting your views, and I appreciate you for that and for being honest. And then you made a comparison to like Arizona, and again, I'm not criticizing you the person, but like, what was the plan here? You have a bunch of grunts who they're treating these places in a kind of in a way that is similar to what they know, right? And it's trying to impose a context that's familiar to them. Arizona, no camels, this kind of no, and trying to deal in a situation culturally, ethnically, religiously, politically that maybe they don't have an understanding of. You're 19 years old. You're coming out of yes, you're historically well read, but it's a Western education.
No, talk
so
about
so tell me about
talk
that.
about no, talk about hitting trying to do surgery with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So say something about that.
No, it's crazy. Yeah. So what one of the most shocking quotes that I ever heard about the Iraq war was the general. He was on the verge of retiring and I forget who it was, but it was whoever was responsible for the invasion. And he literally retired as soon as the invasion was done. And he told Bush and the State Department, we'll win the war, but the State Department needs to have a plan for after that. And that to me is the most criminally insane shit that has ever come out of probably a 50 or 60-year-old person with shiny things on his collar.
And that's because you don't trust the State Department, or because there was no plan that was followed.
Well, how does the State Department enforce its will in a foreign country?
Well, that's another thing that I find maddening about this, Connor, and maybe you can speak to it more as a grunt or as a part of the experiment. It felt like there was this kind of rivalry between like America. People think of America as a singular. America does this. America does that. America sent this person over there. But if you have the State Department and the DoD aren't on the same page, or there's rivalries that are brewing about what should be done or what policy to be taken. I mean, what's going on here? I mean, we're fighting amongst ourselves within the government that's ostensibly trying to enact the same policy. And so how is that not a massive betrayal, a massive clusterfuck, in other words? Excuse my French.
No, it is, but I think it's almost thoughtlessness. So I think that Bush he got Cheney and Rumsfeld in his ear, basically saying like, "Oh, we're gonna, we're doing good in Afghanistan, minimal casualties. Al Qaeda's on the run. We're still hunting for Bin Laden. This, at the other. Here's a thread, and this is the story: is like Zarqawi saw the United States saber rattling about Iraq. He goes to Bin Laden. He's a Jordanian prisoner with tattoos. Osama bin Laden doesn't trust him for shit. He thinks he's a psychopath and like a murderer weirdo who he doesn't want to do anything. But Zarqawi, because the United States was saber rattling about Iraq so much, he says, "Give me $1 million, I'll go to Iraq, and then I'll set up like Al Qaeda in Iraq." And so Bin Laden eventually gets convinced to do that, and so he goes there. Well, that ends up being part of our casus belli. That ends up being part of our
Right.
case for
It's
war
kind of a
against
self-fulfilling
Iraq.
prophecy. It's funny.
It was.
Trump always would say this on the campaign trail in 2016. Obama, he's the founder of ISIS. He founded ISIS. Now, do you think there could be a strong case that Bush is the founder of ISIS, or Rumsfeld is
Oh,
the founder of
100%.
ISIS,
100%.
and because the founder of Al Qaeda in Iraq?
Yeah, but this is this kind of gets back to your question earlier about
Mm-hmm.
like, well, do I support debathification? The thing is that like this was a socially governmentally rotten country, and what I mean by that is that who was it? I think it was like 100 years ago or whatever. They found some guy who descended from Muhammad or his cousin or something like that. He's like a Hashemite. I forget what the exact thing is, but it's somebody who has like religious and cultural importance who can unite the various ethnic groups through their unity in Islam. Like that.
You're
That's what
talking
he
about
represented, and he was the king.
World War One?
King
Faisal, yeah,
Faisal the second. Yeah, yeah.
of the Hafaz, I think. Wait, what's the
I thought it was
Western?
Hashemite.
Yeah, it's a Hashemite ruler in the sense that they descend from that line, and they have the sons who went and took over Jordan and the first part of Iraq for a while, and then also in Syria for a time, I think.
Yeah. So
You know,
he's supposed to have
gods.
a
Sorry.
culturally unifying symbolism that can unite these various ethnic and religious groups. The Shia, the Sunni, the Kurds, he should be able to unite them, and he kind of does. But then you have Saddam Hussein, who was a part of the Ba'athist party, who had like a trans-Arab secular philosophy, and that was like pseudo-leftist. And they wanted to unite Syria and Iraq, and they saw the Western powers as like this corrupting colonial external influence that was turning Arabs and Muslims and various ethnic groups against each other, and it should be ruled by a pan-Arab power. And so Saddam Hussein, I think he kills the royal family, and he takes over, and he was supposed to unify with the leader of Syria, and he's like, no, 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 I'm going to handle my shit over here, you handle your shit over there.
Mm.
The whole timeline that we went through with like the 70s and 80s with the invasion of Kuwait and us kicking them out, all that stuff happens. Well, what ends up happening is because we militarily annihilate him, and he was like, I think like Iraq had the third most powerful army in the world in 1990, and that army was decimated, annihilated by 1992. And not only that, they had all the sanctions for the 13 years leading up to the second to the war on terror invasion of Iraq. And so what happened was the war ended for us. The 1991 Persian Gulf War, it ended for us. It never ended for Iraq. They were under sanctions. They couldn't get the food that they wanted. They couldn't get the oil that they wanted. They didn't have good relationships with their neighbors. And so what Saddam did is he told his generals to go into the Sunni mosques and start recruiting people from the Sunni religious base in order to shore up power within the Sunni stuff. But what ends up happening is the generals end up converting, and they convince Saddam that actually what he needs to do in order to shore up his power is become an Islamist. And so Saddam was never really an Islamist, right? He's like a fairly secular guy. He kept whores and concubines and all that kind of bullshit. But he
Not mutually exclusive
reinforces
with jihadists, though.
true.
Let's be fair.
So but he ends the nightclub scene, ends alcohol, puts in morality police, terrorizes everybody using Islam as a cudgel, talks about the evil Satans, Israel and the United States, et cetera, et cetera. And so when we go in there and we depose him and we de-Baathify, we tell all the Baathists to go home or whatever. What we've effectively done is we've taken an authoritarian government, we've dissolved it overnight, but we dissolved it and they took all the weapons home with them. And so
Mm.
now you have freer Shia and Kurds, but they're preparing for political assassinations, onslaughts, and sectarian violence that the Sunni soon start partaking in order to try to reassert their power within the nation.
By the way, folks, those in the chat, feel free and thank you, Only Fact, for saying in the chat. Feel free to disagree with the historical takes that both Connor and I are giving.
I'm happy to hear
Sure.
criticisms of my summary, but I'm pretty sure my summary is
Sure. But there's something there
the
that, and
narrative.
I don't know if you buy into it. There's a kind of George Gallowayism that I'm hearing a little bit. Thanks for the sub. Slash RFKism in a different context, which is, why do you think they turned to jihadism? Why do you think they turned to that? You pushed them into that. You forced, Russia to
Sure.
annex. You forced them to go into the hands of an insurgency. You forced the Ba'ath. You forced their hands. Do you buy that? I mean, but on the other hand, there's kind of
Yeah.
reaction with like, they're responsible for their own shit. They did October 7th, or they did the annexation. What do you think about that?
I buy material conditions as like a factor in people's decision making, absolutely. And I do think that Saddam became worse of a tyrant because of the pressures that were put
And
on
the
him.
sanctions, which
But
were crippling sanctions.
but what so my question to people who go down that logic though is, as compared to what? Because the compared to what or whatever is letting him keep Kuwait. The compared to what is just letting him keep his weapons of mass destruction program. The compared to what is just saying like, oh yeah, you can do what you want to do. Like that's not going to work, right? Especially not in that region.
This is a good
Sorry, go
point
ahead.
from Vivian, and I think it's one that we need to remember always, and it's something that I always had this problem looking at history, and in a way sometimes I still do. We try to fit onto like familiar frameworks. Um, they were pro-Soviet or they were pro-American, and I think you got some of that nuance there when you were trying to mix it. But just to make it explicit, this is a comment. I think it's important to understand Baathism as a form of not just theocratic totalitarianism, but of Arab nationalism born from a socialist idea and twisted into outright fascism. I think that it is all that, right? It's like it's not this just like singular thing that fits into our ideals. Similar in a way, though very different, to Nasserism and this kind of, or even the Libyan dictator named Gaddafi, where we try to map on our conceptions of what a socialist leader looks like, or what an African leader looks like, or what and I think that's a great comment to bring out, that there's a kind of particularism, a particular kind of flavor that and distinction even between the Baathism in Syria that you referenced from Hafez al-Assad and Bashar al-Assad, and focus on an Alawite minority, to the Baathism, which is more Sunni focused and more cult or personality focused in the person of Saddam, that's kind of changes over the course of his life and over the war. And so I think that's really interesting, both as a point for you, Connor, who maybe isn't at the time kind of apprised of all of this complication and the broader strategic goals of the American, I don't know, military industrial complex at this point in time, which do seem a little bit ambitious and maybe a little naive.
Well, and I think that's perfectly incisive to the point that what's interesting is the deeper you dig, the more you're going to find like, tribal identities, infighting, political intrigue, cults of personality, et cetera, et cetera. But the reason why we use these categories in order to try to understand the factions that are fighting or whatever is because ultimately we just have to do it. And so, for instance, like I think that I have been accused of, and many people have been accused of, boiling down the conflict in Iraq between Shia and Sunni, and then get accused of saying that it's like a sectarian religious conflict. But I would accept the fact that, like, if you look at Ireland, it was a Catholic Protestant conflict, but the roots of the conflict are not
We're also
rooted in
national,
Catholicism or
yeah.
Protestantism. It's based off of like ethnic and religious heritage, right? And so the messy part of it though is that there are I don't think I've heard of very many explicitly secular militias in Iraq or really in the Middle Eastern and North African world. Most of them will at least pay lip service to Islam, if not making it an explicit part of their charter. And so that's the thing is like, just to kind of describe,
Yeah.
when we think of war, we oftentimes think of national level identities fighting against each other towards political dominance in a region, right? So that war was won very quickly. We destroyed the national government of Iraq.
You mean
Much more,
the war against Baathist Iraq was won quickly and effectively? Yeah.
done, right? But what happened after that was a civil war of who gets to rule this country now and how is power divided. And so the Sunni rightfully feared that in a democracy, they would be overpowered because they're only 30% of the country. The Kurds wanted some level of autonomy because they've been historically fucked over. And the Shia, long under the thumb of Saddam and his cronies, were like, hey, this is finally our time to shine, so let's go ahead and do it. And so you have things like the Sadr Brigade, which was the Shia majority or largely Shia militia in Baghdad, who their only goal was to see Westerners leave because they knew that as soon as Westerners leave, Shia are going to have disproportionate control in Iraq. You also had the Sunni who wanted to fight Americans because we had just deposed them and screwed them over. Then you have the Jesus, who's the people in the north? The Kurds,
Mm.
who are kind of our allies, but we have helped them and abandoned them so many times
And
that
they're
they're just
also involved in issues in Syria and Turkey and elsewhere that complicate things
right.
further with a
So
literal
we
NATO
can't fully
ally.
back them. Yeah, we can't back them fully because they're fighting a NATO
It
ally,
reminds me,
Turkey.
and I know this is so because it's so different. What I'm about to say, it is so
Mm,
different, and I'm not saying the conflicts are the same. What I'm saying is the kind of positioning here. It reminds me of the UK and mandatory Palestine, where
mm.
you have you have the French, right, who ostensibly have some desire to obtain lands related to the Sykes-Picot Agreement. You have the initiation of them being there in the first place, which was to stop a greater evil, this being the Ottoman Turks and their kind of and those attacks. And so there's a
There's always a
initial
greater evil, yeah.
justification, and this kind of like uh, yes, you have certain people who understand the conflict among your people, but it felt like the UK didn't truly understand the dynamics at issue here and the different players involved. And
I don't think you can.
yeah,
The
you have like
I don't think
communists, Palestinians, and or Israelis. I actually I forget which was it. Actually might have been communist Israelis, and then the more like Zionist Israelis, and you have the different factions. It's all this big mess, and who's going to make sense of it? And this Western power does not seem
it's as
equipped.
complicated. It's as complicated, if not more complicated, than American politics, where the right wing, we boiled it down into a binary, right?
Yeah,
But when you're talking about the right, you're talking about fiscal conservatives, social conservatives, libertarians, Republicans. We were talking about the Northeastern Republicans.
sure.
Then you're also talking about MAGA Republicans. We already talked about like 6 to 8 tribes right there. I could do the Democrats as well, but you already know where I'm
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
And so it's as complicated as that. But what was interesting, I think, about the conflict was that, like, yeah, the United States got into decent firefights and shootouts and ambushes and all that kind of stuff, but Fallujah was the biggest battle
Sure,
of
yeah.
the war, and that's because Sunni militias took like basically a year in order to fortify a city and tell the Americans, come and get us. And the Americans are like, okay, we're going to come kill you. And so the beginning of the operation was very aggressive, but there were too many civilian casualties. So the provisional Iraqi government told the Americans to stop. We're going to evacuate civilians. And so we spend 6 months letting civilians out, letting insurgents in, and then letting those insurgents prepare. And then it was the heaviest urban fighting since Hue City in Vietnam.
Mm.
So this is like the peak of the war on terror when it comes to Marines. And I'm just going to say
Were
it.
you
I,
there?
I know there's
You weren't in Fallujah, but
no,
you were in Iraq at the
no.
time or
I,
after?
I was in the same. I was in the same province I was
Okay.
after. This is what I was going to say is, I know that a lot of people dislike the war on terror, and they have every reason to. I feel honored to have been trained by the men who went into Fallujah,
Mm.
because if you're talking about like we talked about how in the Marine Corps, in the military, or whatever, your heroes are the people who go into the worst situations possible and still perform at the highest levels. Those are the guys that I talk to. And those guys, by the way, they're all fucked up. Their brains are fucked up. They got PTSD, they got anxiety, they got hypervigilance, et cetera, et cetera. But they were badass warriors. And when you talk to them about their situation or whatever, you're talking to them about, running into a building, or throwing a grenade, or being by tanks that are getting hit by RPGs or something like that. And the one thing that they kind of all admitted was that they were shitting their pants scared. They were
Mm.
terrified. They were so worried about dying because it's just human instinct. But the adrenaline and the training took over, and they did what they had to do. And so getting that close to conflict, and then also being trained by those men, it really rips off the Hollywood veneer of what war is.
Yeah. Speaking of what war is, I mentioned earlier the kind of cliche that we risk, or maybe simplification we risk getting into when you speak of the loss of innocence. Certainly in the
Mm.
Vietnam era, there was this notion of loss of innocence that the government's willing to lie to you. A loss of innocence with respect to American troops in My Lai massacre and situations and atrocities like that. You're you're starting to get, you could speak of 9/11 as its own kind of quote unquote loss of innocence. Um, One situation where people feel that there's a additional loss of innocence paralleled in history, and so you can question whether or not it's a true loss of innocence or just a recurring meme, if you
Yeah, it's
will.
like a generational loss of
And maybe you
innocence.
know where I'm going, are the kinds of things like Abu Ghraib,
Sure.
which are also going on at the time, and a real sense of questioning after a period of pretty uniform support of the country. Um, an
I'll
acknowledgement
do
that people are doing some bad things,
yeah.
maybe because of mental situations or because of the stress of things. But yeah, talk more about um, the other side of it, which is temptations into thinking that this
Yeah.
is not what it should be.
Yeah, so I want to explain these things, and I want to hit the Haditha massacre before we hit like Abu Ghraib and
Mm-hmm.
Guantanamo Bay and an enhanced interrogation, which I have no problems digging into. The Haditha massacre is actually really interesting because if I remember the narrative correctly, is that patrol took like casualties sometime earlier in the week. They took like a roadside bomb or something like that, and I think they got shot at by some like townhome or hamlet or series of buildings. And so what happens is they get pissed off. The rules of engagement no longer apply. And what they do is they dismount, they go into the buildings, and they clear every single room with grenades and rifle fire. But they're not discriminating between men, women, and children. They're literally killing everything that moves. So it's just like, I think it's like 20, 30 civilians or whatever get massacred by a platoon of Marines or soldiers or whatever. But what I think is interesting, obviously, like moral horror, go to jail, prison, whatever. But what I think is interesting is that as the war evolved, there was more training on like scenarios and shoot, don't shoot, and all that kind of stuff. But before the war kicked off, there was only training on like room clearing. So you were not taught to distinguish between like a civilian target and a military target. You literally, like when you were practicing how to clear a room, you literally just threw a grenade in there, a practice grenade. You went into the room and then you shot the targets. And that's what
Is
you
that how
kind of
you were
did.
trained?
Oh, yes. And over and over and over again, right? Especially for infantry. This isn't just one time. You literally do it hundreds or thousands of times. So for me, uh, I actually wonder sometimes if because they were in a high stress situation, if because they were in a fucked up situation, if because they could say, these people are shooting at us, fuck them, who cares? If they defaulted to their training and just started doing it from muscle memory and just killed everyone. And that's not like a legal defense
Oh,
or
I see
anything
what you're
like
saying.
that.
So it's a way of saying, I don't know which is worse,
The
right?
training failed them. That's what I'm trying to say.
So you're saying, is this an act of maliciousness, or is it an act? Is it a systemic act of maliciousness where the tactics are wrong, and because this is a new
Yes.
kind of war?
And that's the thing is as the war evolved, the United States military and the Marine Corps in particular actually had to go back to, I think it was written in 1914. It was like the Small Wars Manual, and it was written for the Spanish American War or some shit like that. And we basically had to relearn guerrilla warfare because we hadn't practiced it in like a century.
Okay, that's an
Anyways,
interesting take, but it's not something that could be said
mm,
about Abu Ghraib.
sure. So yeah, so let's just get into that. And I know people are going to
But I
criticize me
want to hear
for
about like you.
simping for military
No,
people.
I'm not. I don't.
Mhm.
I want to know about your connection to these events as well. Like, how
Sure.
do you view as you're in the moment? Because you're kind of like enmeshed in this, and you're not just hearing about it.
So I'll
Yeah.
yeah. So let's do that real quick, and then we'll hit the bigger events. So I was in Al Assad, and I was doing logistics, and I was doing supply accounting. I was at the battalion level. So what that means is I'm responsible for the gear, the equipment for roughly 2,000 guys. And what happens is somebody else orders it, it comes in, we account for it, we issue it to a unit, right?
And by the
And
way,
so I'm basically
I just want to say, you are a veteran, and you did deploy in Iraq and whatever operation that was in connection with. I don't know. I'm sure there's a specific
Iraqi
name,
freedom.
Iraqi freedom, right? Or you just because you did, and again, we're not just initially at this point in the stage, right? Logistics. That's you were putting yourself at risk. You could have been killed. And so, who knows when the next attack's going to be, right? And so I'm bringing it back to Tim Walz because I hate that there's this attack or the seeming thing where if you didn't fire a shot, and again, I'm not saying that you did. I'm just saying up until this point into this story, you haven't. It doesn't make
No,
you less of a veteran.
I was a person other than Grunt, and I was what's lovingly called a fobbit, so
Okay.
a hobbit that lives on a forward operating base.
Interesting.
And so no, there's like a whole lingo and culture and people who are more hardcore than other people, and you're esteemed in different ways based off of what your job is, and there's a pretty complex culture to it. But what's interesting for me, or like my role, is so I'm in like a logistics hub for Al Anbar province, and so what I see is hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment coming in, getting customized, getting prepared for the end user, and then submitted to the end user. Probably the main thing that I would say that I was a part of was the mine resistant ambush protected vehicle rollout.
Mind
And so
resistant.
mine resistant ambush protected
What does
vehicle.
that mean?
Oh, it's so cool. Let me describe it to you. So so back when we first invaded Iraq, we were already hitting insurgents. They were doing gunfight ambushes, but they also liked roadside bombs. And so what happened with the Humvee was it was designed for like Europe, and it wasn't really designed for like guerrilla warfare. And so the armor plating was largely on the sides, and you could put armor on the bottom. But the bombs were so big, the roadside bombs were so big that when they detonated, they would actually take the armor that was on the bottom of the Humvee and then crush the occupants with the armor that was supposed to protect them. So imagine
Yeah.
you're just chilling,
Horrible.
driving down the road, and you're basically smashed to bits by a supersonic compressor. That's how a lot of people died in Iraq. And so what ended up happening was the technology was so fucked up, and it was like 30 or 40 years old. So the DoD and the military industrial complex does what it does best, and it starts over engineering for a problem. And so what they do, which is beautiful by the way, is they take the bottom hull of a vehicle and they turn it into a V shape. So it directs the blast out to either side.
Hmm.
They also take the engine compartment and the crew compartment and they separate them. That way, when an explosion goes off, you don't have the engine smash into the crew compartment. The engine compartment will actually separate and fly separate from the crew compartment. And so what ends up happening is, oh, and then also we get really complex jammers. We get two jammers. One of them is for radios, and one of them is for cell phones. And so what happens is for 25 to 30 feet in like any direction, it might probably has more
It'll stop
efficiency than
signals
that.
from triggering bombs.
It'll stop signals from triggering bombs. And so as a result, like you have this increase in confidence from like the American warfighters perspective, where they used to be rolling around in Humvees that were smashing their friends to bits and killing them left, right, and center. Now the American taxpayer, God bless them, has spent $250,000 plus another $200,000 in jamming equipment in order to make it infinitely more difficult to kill an
Per
American
unit.
soldier per 10-man unit or 12-man unit that fit inside one vehicle.
Damn.
So yeah, it was a lot of money. But that increase in confidence, and also there was like new, and by the time I was rolling out, there was new and updated armor. A lot of the weapons were getting upgraded, all this kind of stuff. So I'm just seeing all this gear flowing out, getting to the end user, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, it's like I'm one of these guys. I want them to have the best equipment possible so they don't die in a stupid way that could have been prevented if we spent a little bit of extra money. So basically the MRAP rollout is probably the main thing that happens while I'm out there that I'm a part of. And so it's just getting serial numbers for all this gear, logging it, and sending the trucks out to the units.
Sure.
Um, I'm trying to think of what else was cool about that. But basically that was like
we were touching on okay, so you're here at a time outfitting the weapons of war, the tools of war, transportation and logistics at a time when yes, we're here for this mission, yes, we're here for all this, but now there's a growing resentment, there's a growing skepticism, and now you're getting news of these other things.
Sure. So let's get into the other things in a second, but
Yeah.
I also want to say, like, for the enlisted person in particular, but also probably lower level officers, the calculation is very simple. I volunteered for my country. They are telling me to go someplace. I might have to kill someone. I might get injured or die. It is what it is, and I'm going to do it. And there's dickheads out here who are actively trying to kill me and my friends. If they try to kill me and my friends, it's my job to kill them first. That's it. That's like the total
That's your
calculation.
incentive
So
structure. You're not
yeah.
like here
So
saying we're here for this mission. We're doing this.
no,
That's kind of gone
no, no,
away.
no, no, no.
Yeah.
I'm not like, oh, the Shia and the Sunni and the Hashemite kings and like nobody's talking about that shit on the base. It's literally like, hey, we're trying to get Iraq stable enough so we can get the fuck
So we
out
can
of
go
here
home.
because yeah, because basically George Bush kicked a hornet's nest. He didn't know what he was doing. Now we got to stabilize it enough that we can leave. That was the whole thing. Um, and that was tough because Sunni and Shia were killing the shit out of each other. And so getting into the darker sides of the war, I guess. So if you want to start with Abu Ghraib or Guantanamo Bay,
You can
Guantanamo Bay,
give your narrative on it, and then we can move past them and because I know
sure.
that I'm delaying it because I have a great historical interest here, but really I want to know about your role here, and so give me your take on
Yeah.
it in the moment, and then you can move past it, and we can
So
get to the life after the war.
so Guantanamo Bay, we all know it's fucked up. We all know George Bush came up with a bullshit excuse in order to torture people, but at the same time, it's like jihadists. So like, do you really care? And so that's kind of like the perspective on the interior. I know that's fucked
I
up for like
care.
Americans who care. Yes, for bleeding heart liberals who care about due process and the rule of law and perpetuating our constitution into the future and making sure that we're not horrible monsters. You care. But you know the who was it? This could be bullshit. And by the way, I would love for you to fact check me on this. Um, Muhammad Atta, I think. It was one of the masterminds of the 9/11 thing or
He was
whatever.
the lead
And
pilot into I believe the North Tower.
okay, then I'm not thinking of him. There was a guy who went to Guantanamo Bay who was supposed to be one of the main planners of
Talik Sheikh
9/11.
Mohammed, I believe is his name.
Probably. But anyways, whoever was in Guantanamo Bay and we tortured for information. He said, and this could be bullshit. This is what I think Donald Rumsfeld said it. So he's probably just trying to justify his shit after the fact. Or Dick Cheney said it. So he's trying to justify his shit after the fact. But what he said was something to the fact of Muslim warriors or jihadist warriors. It's written in some history book or some story or some hadith or whatever that you can't betray your fellow warriors, right? But if you're put under duress, then there's like some legalistic exception to the code of war where you can screw your buddies over. And so the whoever this guy was allegedly said to his interrogators, "You need to keep torturing us because if you don't torture us, then you don't give us the ability to give you information because if there's no duress, then under our war guidance, we're not allowed to give you any
Color me
information."
skeptical. So what you're saying is that there was a self-serving ideological reason, or sorry, sorry, I'm going to repeat that again.
Mhm.
That the rationale in a way was one of ideological mercy to give a clear
Yeah, like the ability
basis.
you can now confess because you're under duress or something like that. I don't know.
Interesting.
Anyways, it's
do
it's
you buy
probably
that?
maybe I don't know.
Like
I don't know.
as you sit here and say it, what do you think about that? I mean, does that sounds like it's tailor made for the kind of receptive audience at home for the kind of New England Republicans we were referencing before, as they're sitting over their cocktails.
I think Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney heard it and they were like, "Awesome,
Let's run with it."
I'm gonna say that forever now."
Yeah. Okay. So,
So,
but you
all right,
you're kind of not thinking in those ideological terms at the time that this is happening. Yeah.
no. Same thing with Abu Ghraib. Which, by the way, I think what happened was the CIA. What they do, and we kind of know they do this. We can't torture, right? CIA allegedly, I don't know, can't torture. So what they do is they get third country nationals, people who are different nationality. They bring them in. They say, "Hey, tell us what we want to know, or this guy's going to torture you." And then they have the other guy do it. So that we're not torturing you; it's this other guy. And so the other guy's like pulling fingernails, sleep deprivation, all the crazy shit that you saw in Abu Ghraib, sicking dogs on people, making them shit themselves, doing
But
gay
you also
pyramids,
saw a kind
whatever.
of sadism, a kind
Oh
of
yeah.
like we're doing
Oh, they liked
this
it.
and we
They
want
thought
to
it was
do it and
funny.
we like it. And it was yeah. So, but how can that be, Connor? I mean, what is it about the system? Is it bad? These are bad eggs, or is this a system? I mean, you talked about how the Marines, and
This is
again,
war.
I get you,
That
and I'm not being critical of you necessarily. I'm if offering a little bit of a perspective where you before spoken kind of very candidly about, hey, the Marine Corps has indoctrinated me to think that killing is this glorified thing. Is it the system that's created this set of incentives where people can be so callous about the situation where they're taking pleasure in it, or is it bad apples? What is it, or is it a combination?
No. I think it's way deeper than that.
Okay.
I think like just as an example, I think the Huxley quote, where I don't know, Chud Logic said it a few times. Have you ever heard it?
Uh, Sorry, say that again. The Huxley quote for what?
Yeah, so let me just look it up because it's actually a really good quote, and I think it's just true. I think it explains a lot of politics and a lot of conflict. Righteous violence. So, all right. To be able to destroy with good conscience, to be able to behave badly and call your bad behavior righteous indignation, this is the height of psychological luxury, the most delicious of moral treats. And the quote is longer. It says the surest way to work up a crusade in favor of some good cause is to promise people they will have a chance of maltreating someone. And then the quote continues. So I think that psychologically we crave, or humans, particularly like violent humans, men with testosterone, they crave a righteous violence. We love righteous violence. So
Mm.
the Nazis, the reason why we can endlessly pick on the Nazis as villains is because they're perfect villains. So we can always do the most horrible shit to them in movies because they're villains, right? And I think that even in video games, right? I think part of the psychological appeal. I'm a huge fan of Warhammer 40,000. In
Which
Warhammer
was the impetus
40,000,
for this whole thing, but we will get
yeah,
there.
what Warhammer 40,000 is a very it's morally complex in that there aren't necessarily any good guys, but it's very clear what you have to do as an individual agent of these broader institutions because every fight is existential. There's no quarter, there's no surrender, there's no diplomacy. Every single enemy that's out there wants to kill you. So if every enemy out there wants to kill you, the only option is to kill them. And so with that amount of moral clarity, you can destroy in good conscience. You can torture in good conscience. You can be sadistic in good conscience because your enemy is not worth consideration because they're so evil.
That's interesting. At this point in your life, have you gotten into Warhammer or wargaming at all?
Oh, I've loved Warhammer since 2002,
So you're at this point.
2003.
So you're into wargaming even before
I'm
you.
I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it while I'm in the military because it's too
Yeah.
nerdy of a hobby and it's way too expensive and it takes way too much time.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there were times when I was in Japan where I would check out the Games Workshop website in order to read up on the most recent lore release
For
for the
Warhammer.
War of Armageddon. Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. And for those of you who aren't apprised, I did a little research before I had this conversation with you. This is a universe in which there's a war. There's Warhammer and there's Warhammer 40k, right? And one is
Yeah,
set kind of in the future. And in this future, from what I gather, there's different factions, but like there's a massive war, and war kind of everything's shitty, people are shitty, and these kind of
every
cycles
aspect of society is dominated by conflict.
and conflict is the name of there's like these weird gods and there's weird alliances. Even the good, there's no like real good guys. The humans are like these religious fanatics. But to me, it's kind of like Connor is a fascist because
Mm,
to like Warhammer is to be a fascist, but he's also a
true.
grunt. And now what you're telling me is you're into Warhammer and you are in Iraq after Warhammer with a knowledge of those kind of conflicts and those themes and that kind of thing. And in a way, you're not consciously at the moment applying those concepts to what's going on there, but at least in retrospect, there's some mapping on of principles
No,
or at least
it's
things. You know what I'm saying?
it's worse. It's worse in retrospect. So one of the craziest things is empathy, right? The ability to live in your friend or enemy's shoes. That's one of the weirdest things is realizing but for the grace of God, there go I, right? And so you kind of realize if you were a 16-year-old kid or a 15-year-old kid growing up in Iraq, the United States had fucked you over for decades. You know, they came into your country, they fucked up the entire government, the entire country is at civil war, everybody has guns, everybody has explosives. Then maybe you would plant a roadside bomb, or maybe you would go to war with an AK, or maybe you would volunteer to be part of a militia that goes into Fallujah. And so you kind of understand that, like, the people who you're fighting against are kind of like a moral mirror to yourself.
Well, that's interesting,
But
Connor, because I think that that's exactly what you would do, and that's not to
is
say
what?
uh, is
Oh, if I was in their shoes,
defend
that's
your
what I would do.
country, right?
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
yet, right, like, and I understand that we can have, there can be reasons why people on both sides think that what they're doing is righteous, and in a sense, sometimes you have to fight good people who are doing things that they believe are good.
Well,
What? Like these people who are
yeah.
planting bombs,
So
they're not mustache twirling villains in that sense. Do you believe that to be the case?
so hold on. So
Yeah.
this is where it gets interesting. Is that there? But as an example, one of this is one of my friends. I don't want to claim a story that he told me, but he was in the Second Battle of Najaf.
Okay.
And so what happened was and bear in mind, I'm telling this story secondhand. So if I fuck
Sure,
it up,
sure.
my apologies. But a helicopter gets shut down. I think the crew are dead, but we need to recover the helicopter and the bodies. And so they're doing a quick reaction force in order to get people out there. And so they get people out there and they're going to go take a building. They know there's a militia inside. And so what ends up happening is this team is going to go in the front. My buddy, who's like 19, never been in combat before, he's shitting his pants. I'm editorializing,
Yeah.
but he's scared out of his mind. He's tunnel visioning. His adrenaline is through the roof. He's told, if anybody comes out of this door and they're not wearing American fatigues, you kill them. And so him and his buddy set up there. They're pointing their machine gun at a door, and then boom, the entry team takes it. And so they take it, and then a whole like 7 guys squirrel out of this building, and they're not ready for my friend at all. And so he uses an M249 squad automatic rifle or weapon in order to mow down 7 guys. And so he kills them in like a matter of like 10 seconds. He just mows down 7 people. They go into the building and they recover all the intel. They get the laptops, they get the discs, they get the flags, they get the AKs, they get all that crap. They take it back for the intel. Well, the people that they were fighting was a militia called the Soldiers of Heaven. They're a Shiite militia who believe that Iraq was the end times. And the way to usher in the Messiah was by causing more chaos in the world. And so they weren't just killing Sunni militias that were rival to them. They were murdering Shiite clerics who were calling for peace because they thought that if they called for peace, they would prevent the end of the world and the second coming of the Messiah, or the first coming of the Messiah, I guess, in their view.
Mm.
So for me, it's like, fuck those guys, right? Like they were killing civilians, they were killing clerks who were calling for peace. They're an apocalyptic Muslim cult. They're doing all this crazy shit. So on one hand, there but the grace of God go I,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's also some shit that's so evil, you're just like, yeah, fuck them.
Yeah. So in that moment, um, do you think that characterized most of the jihadists that were being fought? That
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I
we
have
wouldn't
no
have a sense
idea.
of the numbers.
But
This
jihadists were
friend
doing
of
really
yours,
fucked up shit. They were killing each other, roadside
yes,
bombs,
no
setting
doubt,
up
no doubt.
suicide bombings,
There's some bad dudes,
all sorts of
and
all sorts of evil shit.
for sure.
Actually, sorry, real quick, just
Yeah.
to ram this home, and I'm sorry, but I just know that there's going to be people who they don't
Yeah.
like my takes.
That's okay. No,
While I was in
I'm
Iraq,
glad you're being honest, and I'm glad. Listen, I'm trying to get a sense of you here, so just don't
Sure.
worry about them.
Well, okay. Well, while I was in Iraq, one of the most egregious and horrifying and disgusting things, you can probably still find the news story right now, is it was in late 2007, early 2008. Jihadists went into an insane asylum or like a mental hospital. They kidnapped some of the members, put suicide bombs on them, and then bombed an animal bazaar. So a place with like animals for sale. I can't think of something more evil than taking an innocent person who doesn't understand what's going on, putting explosives on their chest, walking them into a market filled with innocent people and innocent animals. I'm like an animal lover,
Mm.
and murdering like 37 people. That's the most like evil shit I've ever heard in my life. And if you put that person in front of me, I would violate international laws of decency in order to inflict justice on them.
Mm. talk to me about your friend. You say that your friend did this.
Hmm.
It's all well and good for us after the fact to say, hey, afterwards we found out these people are part of the equivalent of Heaven's Gate, whatever, David Koresh type end of times, um, folks. That's cold comfort sometimes at night, or with respect to some of the trauma. Did he ever seem like I just killed 7 people kind of deal?
He no he and that's the other thing too, is that there's all sorts of different kinds of people who respond psychologically different to trauma and conflict. So I'm a sensitive guy. If I kill someone, I'm going to light a candle, I'm going to pray, I'm going to try to, make my peace with God and hopefully still get into heaven if it exists.
Even for the end
There
of
are some.
timers?
What's that?
Even for the end of
Yeah.
timers?
Yeah. Christ's forgiveness is for everyone, right? And like, I'm not like a literalist Christian, but still, like, the concept of Christian forgiveness is that like literally everyone can be forgiven by Christ, right? So yeah, so I would try to do right after the fact, to pay honor and homage to, or not homage, but I would try to pay honor to the significance of the event. Some people are just warriors, man. Some people are just the descendants of people who killed for a living in the ancient world, and their genetics survived up into the modern day, and they live for this shit. And so they might be traumatized, they might drink alcohol, they might be emotionally distant to their family, but they like it. They like war, they like conflict, they like killing, they think it's awesome.
Okay. Thank you for that, for those takes, and I appreciate your describing them. I think that it does for me raise a lot of complicated feelings. Um,
Why?
the whole situation, because I can understand that Saddam was a horrific tyrant who, I'm sure if the means were available to him, would do worse things and invade more countries, and that's kind of the macro. The micro, I'm sure that yes, I do not like jihadists. I'm not a pro jihadist person. Um,
But
what the but is, I'm thinking about the people we sent to do the job and the soldiers that were your comrades in arms. These are young kids. They're kids. If they were on a panel today, they would be saying some weird stuff. Or remember what Polar's World? Did you ever meet Polar's World? He
no.
was on some Prime panels. I'm trying to think of other people. These are just kids, and so we're talking about them. These concepts and notions of people being inherently having this warrior culture. I don't want to say warrior gene. These concepts of what's right, what's wrong, vis-a-vis an enemy who is trying
Some
to
of them
bring about
don't
its
care.
time. It for me, it's kind of odd to think that those kinds of moral quandaries are being put upon the most vulnerable group, young men whose brains are still developing, at a time in their life when they're very vulnerable and they're being subjected to a kind of coercion. Now, that might be necessary because of what war is and the need for have young men conduct war. And so maybe there's no getting around that. But it does, for me, I get a sense of sadness that you had to go there and that all these other people are being a party to what might have been a massive mistake and maybe didn't need to be done in a certain
The
way.
the Yeah, but if you, let's say we like up the age to 25 to 30,
Sure, yeah.
I think you would lose recruitment by
Sure, sure.
80%.
Yeah.
And not just that,
What does that
but
tell
just
you,
the
Connor?
fear, the sheer physical
Yeah.
demands as you age as well, like just getting injured and working out and all that kind of stuff. It takes a lot to, as a matter of fact, I would say most people are capable of doing the military specifically because they're young, and because they're growing.
Yeah, and that to
So
me is maybe that's just a fact of war, and it has been for centuries, if not thousands of years. I'm not here to give a take that's like
no,
you have to be 25,
you can
but I'm just saying it to me it is something oddly, I don't know, poetically tragic
no, you
about
can
sending these
no, you can hate it.
kids to do
But
this complicated
the
thing.
tragedy, so the poetic tragedy, right? And maybe we could wrap it by racking, kind of move into the next
Yeah,
portion, because I think it actually lines up with what you're saying.
perfect.
So I deploy to Iraq. I have a pretty chill deployment. I think we get shelled once or twice. I become vaguely aware of a couple of crazy incidents that happen outside the wire,
Yeah.
but nothing too crazy.
Yeah.
I come home. I'm walking around like I have a whole bunch of swagger because I deployed to Iraq. I came back. I didn't die. I go to San Diego, California for my next duty station. It's beautiful. I love the weather. I like the people. It's awesome. Only problem is it's too expensive. So I do a year and a half. I drink alcohol for fun with friends. I chase a lot of girls because I'm happy to have survived.
So
And
back
then
to your old ways in a way, plus
which
the
is
discipline from military.
cope. Definitely cope. Like I don't have a
Oh,
belief system.
your behaviors cope.
Yes.
Not cope in the meme sense, in that literally to cope with situations
Yeah,
and things.
alcohol and chasing women was a coping mechanism for not having a defined sense of purpose or a intelligent understanding of what I'd just been through.
Okay.
Right. And so I get out. I go to college in Central Florida. That's kind of where my family and I have
Florida
settled.
man.
Yep. And I love it. It's insane, but I love it. And while I'm doing that, I continue the cope of like alcoholism. And I'm working 40 hours a week. I'm taking the GI Bill in order to make ends meet because
Mm-hmm.
that's like $1,400 a month. And even back in 2010, you can't survive off of $1,400 a month unless you're eating ramen. As an independent person, right? If you're paying for
Yeah,
rent and food and utilities and cars and car insurance and all that kind of crap.
it adds up.
So yeah, so I'm working 40 hours a week. I'm using the GI Bill. I'm going to college. I'm drinking a lot. I'm chasing girls, and I am anxious, sad, angry, suicidal, whatever. Can't articulate the emotions because most of it is like anger and rage. But it turns out that like the way that the military and I think masculinity to a certain degree, it teaches you to deal with emotions is like you're allowed to feel two things as a military man: anger and numbness. Those are the two things you're allowed to feel. And maybe pleasure on occasion from like alcohol or a woman. And so within the limits of those confines, I realize that I'm like broken and I don't understand a single fucking thing that I've been through. And so, like I said, I start writing. I write my little autobiography. It's terrible, but I wrote it. And I try to figure out my experiences. I start researching all the history. I get myself through college. And I also realize that I'm not done with blood, guts, violence, horror, because I never proved to myself that I was capable of dealing with the peak of what's worst about humanity. And so I want to go on that adventure. And then that's part of the motivating reason for going into law enforcement was like finding purpose, serving community, and proving to myself that I could handle the worst of what the world had.
Can I ask a question there?
Sure.
So you say anger, maybe a little bit of suicidal adulation. Is that what's the word? What's the term? Sorry.
I ide
Ideation.
ideal
I don't know.
ideation. Yeah, there you go.
Maybe that's right. And alcoholism. When you say alcoholism, you mean alcohol abuse or literal physical dependency and addiction?
Probably just binge drinking.
Okay.
You know, it was
Um,
college. You know,
right. You were
like
in
like in
college, right? Yeah.
yeah. So it was like
I forget how young you were. I mean, you were crazy young.
yeah, I was like 22, 23.
Yeah. So
So I get done with work. I go drinking with all my restaurant buddies because retail restaurant industry. I don't know if you guys know that, but they like to party a little bit.
I was a
We
bartender
would
and a server, so I understand.
Yeah, so we'd drink until 2 or 4 in the morning. We would party. We
Yeah.
would, if we had a shift the next day, we would go to sleep for 5 or 6 hours. We'd wake up and we'd do it all over again. And it was great. It was fun. It was awesome.
And you say that's a coping mechanism in a sense.
I would say the alcohol and the pursuit of shallow relationships was a coping
Yeah.
mechanism.
And this wasn't the girlfriend from high school. This was purely physical type stuff or shallow situations where you weren't kind of pursuing a longer term relationship because you were just
Yeah,
trying to have
and
fun.
I was trying to be brief, but I would say that like my coping was from 2010 to 2012, and then and I had almost like a spiritual revelation in 2012.
That you
And
wanted to be
then
a cop.
no, but I wanted to live. I wanted to find purpose. I wanted to find meaning. I wanted to have deeper relationships. I wanted to be engaged with my community. I wanted to die as an old man, not as a 23-year-old. I wanted more experiences. I wanted to, I wanted to see everything that the world had. I wasn't done yet. And I think that there probably are a lot of young men who experienced what I experienced from 2010 to 2012, and they didn't make it. They didn't make it. They're either they're drug addicts, or they're alcoholics, or they're homeless, or they killed themselves. And that 2010 to 2012 period
Was a
was
defining.
it was a spiritual reckoning with everything I'd been through, and it was me trying to like ignore it because I wasn't ready to deal with it. And then 2012 was my road to Damascus moment.
As we start to move on, because this whole thing was triggered by this, um,
Sure.
the hobbyism. How's your wargaming here? You're maintaining your interest in these other. I mean, these other hobbies are outlets as well, right? I mean, there are other.
I don't have time.
You don't have time in this period of your life.
No, I'm working 40 hours a week. I'm taking 15 credit hours a semester. I have limited but real relationships with women and friends, and I'm drinking and having fun and partying, being a college guy. But so I say, like, partying, having fun or whatever. But what's going on? What I would say is the drinking's fun, hanging out with people, young people, talking BSing, talking about life, religion, aspirations, ambitions, all of that's fun. But when you get done and it's over with, the shift's over, you're going to bed. When you're going to bed and you got nothing left except for your thoughts, that's kind of when all the fucky shit comes up and starts messing with you. And so it's those moments of like quiet that actually start screwing with you. And I think a lot of people avoid those moments of quiet. And so you'll see people become workaholics, alcoholics, drug addicts, whatever. But I think that if you actually want to kind of explore your trauma and get over your trauma, you have to sit with those bad thoughts.
And that's what you do when you come to your epiphany that, hey, I want to live for something beyond this. You graduate, I'm assuming?
Yeah, so I would say my road to Damascus, religious moment, whatever, was like 2012,
Okay.
and then I finished my degree in 2015. So
and you're like 24, 25?
Yeah. So I took 5 years to finish a 4-year degree. So I was 26 or 27
because of extracurriculars and juggling other stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Also, when I had my road to Damascus moment, which for those of you who don't know, there was I think it's Paul, right? Paul was somebody who hated Christians, and he was hunting Christians and killing them in the name of the Roman Empire. And then God struck him with a beam of light while he was on the way to Damascus. And then he had an epiphany, and he decided that he wasn't going to hunt Christians anymore, and he became a Christian. And then he became like the foundation of the church. So I'm not saying like I'm the foundation of a church, but I am saying that I had that zeroed in epiphany of what I'm doing is not working. It's not good for me. It's not worth continuing. And I have to seriously change the way that I'm living if I want to not kill myself or not become a drug addict.
And you become an MP?
No.
What? Oh,
so,
sorry.
Yeah. So I'm not in the military at this point.
I thought you became an MP, or is that wrong?
No.
Oh, you became a cop.
I became a cop.
Oh, okay.
And so what ended? Yeah. So I did 2006 to 2010 in the military. I did 2010 to 2012 being a piece of shit. 2012 to 2015 finishing my degree, and then 2015 is when I actually go to the academy.
Police academy.
Yeah.
And they love former military, right?
Oh, I thought I was the shit. I thought I was going to show up. I thought I was going to do 10 push-ups. I thought I was going to, pass my little written test, and I thought they were going to worship me like a god. I was a fucking moron. I got my ass kicked so hard. I went to one of the best academy. I would say it's probably the best academy in Florida, and they beat
Cop City, or is that in Atlanta?
Yeah, I went. Yeah, I went to Orlando's Cop City, and they beat the shit out of me and made me real humble real quick.
That's so fascinating. So you were literally a beat cop.
Yep.
So once again, you're starting as a grunt. That's so.
Yes.
So what is that? What is that about? Like, you are, maybe it's, you would want it to be otherwise, but it sounds like you're being gravitated, or you're going towards the grunt positions, the on the ground positions.
I want to earn it. I don't want to be a pussy. I don't want to get my 4-year degree and my fat paycheck and live in rarefied atmosphere with all the other elites of the world. I want to earn it. I want to see what's actually what I want to see why it sucks. And it sucks, but it's also pretty funny and it's pretty cool.
And okay, so now we're talking about you're in the academy 2015, 2016, right? Thereabouts.
Yeah, sorry.
You're
There
late
was like
20s.
wasn't there like a question or like a motivating transition thing for
Oh,
like
sorry.
PT? No. I'm wondering what it was. I forget what it was. It was 5 or 10 minutes ago.
I'm I'm seeing some parallels in the sense of, isn't masculine this kind of gruntness, this kind of I need to show myself, I need to prove myself to other men? Isn't that also a kind of pseudo coping mechanism that
Sure.
there are these greater ideals, but how much do those matter to you as opposed to the I need to show my self-worth? And in a sense, do you understand what I'm asking? One is like a more kind of self-driven thing as opposed to I actually do want these other community-based goals. Which one is dominant? Are they in conflict? What's going on with that?
It's I think it's me mostly. Reason being is just because I've spent my entire life reading about war and conflict and great men and virtues and vices and temptation and death and ghosts and all that crap. And so I wanted to know, can I do that stuff and survive? And so far the answer's been yes. I've done a pussified version compared to a lot of other people. A lot of other people did infantry, special forces. They were CIA interrogators or whatever. But those people don't talk on Twitch and YouTube politics because if they did, it'd probably be illegal. So I wanted to find it out within what I think of my realm of capabilities.
Excellent. So you're a cop. You're in your mid to late 20s. So you're about as old as I
Mm,
am at this point, and
yeah.
you're a beat cop, and it's like 2015, 16, 17. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. We're 3 years away from COVID. We're 3 years away from your start, more or less, in Twitch, or maybe even before that. Maybe you start streaming before that.
No, I start in 2019.
Okay.
I start when I leave law enforcement.
So where's Mrs. Points? Well, tell me about in summary.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to know about that.
Yeah. So 2013. So
Oh, you skipped over
2012.
her.
No. She's an important part of the story. So 2012, when I have my religious epiphany and I realized that I don't like the relationships or the way that I'm interacting with alcohol or the way that I'm pursuing my college degree or anything like that. I have a moment of chastity. I actually go on like
No.
I swear to God, I swear to God. I said I will not have a relationship with anybody unless it's the real deal. Like unless I think it's something. And
That's
so
part of your epiphany is this
is
Lancelot.
I'm wasting my time and energy and emotions on things that are horrible. And so I have a moment of chastity. I say that I won't have any kind of relationship with any woman unless it's somebody serious. And I already knew my wife before that. She worked
Wow.
at the restaurant.
Oh, so you're
Uh,
missing a total. You've totally skipped over the first
mhm.
meet.
Okay.
You don't
Uh,
have to say it if it's uncomfortable. If there's like,
no, it's
if
fine.
you were
It's
a
fine.
dork.
I'm just trying to think of how to
I
narrativize
want to
it.
know who asked who
So
out. I want to know. I want to know like,
Oh Oh, okay. Yeah, you want the juicy details.
yeah,
Okay, so we'll slow down for this portion of it.
yeah.
So the uh I'm just going to share this. I don't care if it's like a doxing thing. I used to work at a pizzeria called Mellow Mushroom. So Mellow Mushroom Pizzeria in high school, I was a dishwasher. I did salad hoagie and I did ovens and it was a great experience. And if you're an angry stoner and you want to work at a great restaurant, Mellow Mushroom's the shit. So I go to the military. I start going to college. A lot of my friends work at Mellow Mushroom just because it's a cool place. They got craft beer, they got good pizza, they got all that kind of crap. So Mellow Mushroom is one of the places that I go to get drunk and hang out after work
And eat pizza.
and and eat pizza. And so the old boss walks in and recognizes me through a series of nefarious dealings. I end up getting hired again. Then when I get hired again, Victoria's there, and she is very cute, very pretty. I think she was like 19 or 20 at the time, so she was like
That's your
five
wife's
years
real
younger than me.
name.
hmm
I didn't know
Victoria.
that. Okay.
Yeah, and so I meet her, but she has a boyfriend. She has a serious boyfriend
Oh,
she's been committed to for like 2 years.
oh,
So I'm like, okay, like I'll go do my thing, whatever. And so I date a couple other girls for like a year while we know each other, but we work together, and she's competent, intelligent, fierce, mean, funny. She's great,
so you
but
you
she's
you
dating this
kind of have a crush on her. You like her, but she has a serious relationship.
she has a serious relationship, and I'm not the kind of guy to like screw up a relationship for somebody else.
Yeah,
So I don't even consider it a thing. And then what ends up happening is she mentions to me that her relationship is on the rocks, and I'm like, oh,
that
awesome.
is that's a sign.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we decide it wasn't like a date, but we go to a place called Pita Pit, which is a place that's for like midnight, 1 a.m. taco pita snacks or whatever. And so after shift, we hang out and we just start talking. And she's as cool as I thought she was.
That's a
And
bit
so we
of a
probably
date. It's a bit of a date. Wait,
it was a date.
you guys say to each other, "Let's go get food at a specified time late at night and with no occasion." That's a bit
Right.
of a date.
It was a bit of a date, but she
But
but she
she's
was
seen someone, but
committed.
yeah.
She was committed to somebody else.
So
So
it's
anyways,
more of like a test. But here's the thing, right? So, and you, I don't want to interrupt you, but I have to.
go ahead.
Do you think? Oof, I am gonna
No,
ask
go
it.
ahead. Go ahead.
Does that relationship end if you do badly on the date?
Oh yeah, for sure.
You
Yeah,
think
yeah.
you
Oh
think it
wait,
ends
wait.
no matter what? Or do you
No, no,
say
no, no,
you
no.
think that
No, I
you're
was
the
saying
fact
that
that the
if
date
if
works
I
well?
was yeah, if I was an idiot or a moron or not interesting, that would have been the last time that we would have hung
Okay,
out outside of work.
sorry,
For
continue.
sure. Yeah, yeah. So um no, that relationship probably would have ended within 6 months or a year,
No matter
but
what.
it would not have been because of me.
Got it.
Right. So anyways, so our non-date date goes well. She's like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm out. So she dips out on the boyfriend, moves back in with her people. I ask her out. We start dating. Unfortunately, we realized very early on that we're like super compatible, like giga compatible. Like
Unfortunately,
this, yeah, because I'm like, this is my wife. Like I literally tell somebody within like 2 months of dating her, I'm like, this is my wife. And there's like this terror, this this terror, and she felt it as well. So I'm not talking too much smack, but there's this terror of knowing that you're with the one, because that means everything else is done. All the alcoholism, all the hedonism, all the everything else that you ever pictured, it's done. You found your person. And so I found her, and then she waffled on me for a second, and then I told her to stop being a wussy, and then I waffled on her for a second, and she told me to stop being a wussy, and then by verbally abusing each other, we committed to each other, and it's been a decade now. It's been like 12 years.
you've been married for 12 years.
We've been together for 12 years. We've been married since 16, so we've been married for 8.
So since you were right around when you finished the
Is it
academy,
8? Yeah.
you don't know how many years
So
you've been married?
no,
Busted,
I don't. Yeah,
busted,
yeah.
busted, super
Well, hey,
busted.
time flies when you're
Yeah,
having
but
fun.
I'm sure you know all
So
the Warhammer lore. You don't know
I
how
do.
long. You know how long the first Imperium War. I don't even know if these are terms. Or wait,
Yeah.
wait. I know something.
The
The
Horus
God
Heresy.
Emperor and his Adeptus Mechanicus.
Yeah.
You didn't think I knew that word, but I did. Adeptus Mechanicus is a word, and they're a religious cult of tech people, right?
Yes. Yes.
Owned. Owned. Okay, so you're married in 2016. That's you go from okay. That's about 3 years of dating, right? 3-4 years.
Yeah. So we start in. I want to say we start going out like November of 12. We've done the math a whole bunch of times. But we started dating, I think, in November of 2012. We're together for like a year or two. We get engaged. We get married in 16. We have our kid almost immediately. But I was already in law enforcement for 2 years at that point. I was in law enforcement since 2015, and she was like a huge part of why I was able to do it. Because law enforcement, I had a pussy version of law enforcement. I was a patrol cop in a city of 15,000. That's actually like a fairly nice city,
Mm.
and we had one hardcore incident per week. Whereas a lot of my friends who went to Orange County Sheriff's Office, which is like the biggest sheriff's office around me, they had like 2 or 3 hardcore incidents per night.
Yeah.
And so for me, like I keep joking I'm a sensitive guy. I am a sensitive guy. So for me, like seeing like one really messed up thing, and by that I mean like crazy accident, amputation, suicide, homicide, stabbing, rape, whatever. Seeing one of those per week and then writing the report and then processing it and then all that kind of stuff, I would normally be like back to ready to go do some more crazy shit by the time the next crazy thing came out.
So it was a
But
good.
it was a lot. It
It
was a
was
lot.
it was a lot. Um, but you're saying that the cycle of it was just enough that you were able to manage it, and you're also
Yeah.
citing your wife for being able to let you do that in the sense of like giving you the support to do it, or literally taking
Yeah.
care of the child.
Yeah, yes and yes.
Okay.
So the way that I talk to y'all on Twitch and YouTube politics is the way that I talk to her, and she
No, it's
is
not.
like, well, I don't,
Really?
maybe I don't know, but but it's just like verbal. It's like vomit, right? It's just like verbal vomit. It's like here's everything that I experienced in the past 72 hours. Please God, listen to me, all the details, all the tangents, right? And so she was just great. She was a great
I'm gonna
ear, great
poke
sense of
you a little
support.
bit
She's insightful. Yeah,
because you're using terms, and I believe that you believe them. Like she's fierce, she's smart, she's this, she's that, she's caring, she's loving. I want to actualize them. So,
sure.
what moments stick out? You can be as descriptive or as not, like where you're like, oh, this is my wife. She is fierce because of this. She is this because you know you kind of get what I'm
Sure.
asking, like a little more
So
detail.
yeah, sure. So the first time that I realized that she was of outstanding moral character was she told me, and this might have been the Pita Pit date. She was just we were talking about like different experiences and
Yeah,
different crazy things that had happened in our life, and she told me about her first dog Solomon, who she had when since she was like 2,
you Christian.
and yeah, well she's not Christian, but her family is. And
Oh,
so she had Solomon for 15 years, something like that, and he was passing. And so she sat with him and knew that he was going and just sat with him for like a day and just watched movies back to back to back and cuddled him and pet him and all that kind of stuff until he passed. And in retrospect, like she was too young. She was like 17 or 18 or something like that. So in retrospect, she would have told her parents to like, hey, let's go get Solomon taken care of and euthanize him or whatever. But just having the strength, because that was one of her best friends, you know, at that time in her life,
sure.
having the strength to see your friend out as they're passing was one of the first examples where I was like, this woman's hardcore. She can deal with crazy shit. And on top of that, she loved her friends so much that she was willing to see them out. There's plenty of people who are cowards when it comes to death who don't want to deal with that at all. So they'll just pretend it's not happening.
I want to yes and you.
So,
I do want to say yes. I think there are people who are very good in crisis and people who give the dignity and respect in the final moments. I do want to say for people who are unable to do that, I respect that too. I
sure.
understand. I don't think when you say coward, you're meaning it in a pejorative sense, as opposed to you're just upping the people who are able to do that. Or I don't know if maybe you are, but
I might a little bit, but I also understand. I've taken a lot of hits in my life.
yeah,
I hate them. I hate them, and they destroy people. So I understand why people avoid them. I just think that if you love someone and you care someone enough to be, and I'm talking about like pets and
yeah,
family. If you love someone, and they're a huge part of your life,
you owe
then
it.
I think that's part of your
Yeah,
responsibility.
yeah. It is tough. I had someone very close to me who there it was very tough to do a person, and
Mm.
but I think that it was needed, and I don't know if I would have been able to live with myself if I had been unable to in that moment, be with them as they
Oh, and you just
passed,
got to be there. You
yeah,
just got to be there.
yeah,
You just got to be there, and they'll be there one moment, and then the next one they'll be gone,
yeah,
and it sucks. But one of the things that I learned from law enforcement, this is a tip that I have for people who do first response work or hospital work or even lose a family member. You know, life when you get that close to death, you kind of realize like how fragile life is. And so, my recommendation is go find the most hardy beautiful, delicious meal that you can and savor every single bite of it. And I swear to God, it'll be the best, like some of the best meals of your life will be immediately after a tragedy, because you're realizing that one day it's going to be you. And so you just taste every single detail of the meal. And that's a recommendation.
I appreciate that,
But
and there are moments where I think that people, there have been times in my life certainly where I'm not savoring the meals. It's just the mechanical thing. It's just the whatever, right? It's just fuel,
mhm.
and you can sort of get lost into like not you're having foods that you enjoy, but you're not taking the time to enjoy them. So we're transitioning from Connor as war hero slash fascist grunt orc to Connor as college playboy partier to Connor as road
Ah,
to Paul of Apostle Paul, and meeting the love of his life, and then finally to Connor as father. So talk a little bit
mm.
about your first child.
Well, if I may, just because this
Yeah,
is
sure.
part of the transition,
Oh, sure.
with law enforcement, I would say that when you see me in Twitch and YouTube political debates, if you see me get really upset about death or terrorism or law enforcement or any of that kind of shit, a lot of that does come from the Marine Corps stuff, because the Marine Corps stuff was like pretty intense, but I didn't have it in my face, right? Like I didn't have people die on me when I was in the military.
Is that a chip
But
on your
when I was
shoulder?
in,
Do you?
no,
Okay,
because I fulfilled it with law enforcement.
got it.
So with law enforcement, what's crazy is I think it's like 3 months of field training. So I did the academy. I did my 3 months of field training. I had someone murdered in front of me on my last night of field training. So this is literally me. Like this is supposed to be my christening moment of becoming a law enforcement officer. Is the end of field training, and I'm at a bar, breaking up fights in order to get people to clear out for the night, and somebody gets gunned down in the crowd. That I'm right there, and I have to fight through the crowd to get to them,
The perp
and then no,
or
the
the
victim,
victim?
the perpetrator took off in a car. And so I basically like I literally hold the gunshot wound while somebody else is doing CPR and this guy passes. And then I also have to go talk to his girlfriend. It's a whole
Mhm.
fucking mess. And so basically like I have this like huge reckoning moment. I don't have a kid at this point. The I have this huge moment where it's like, okay, I've been looking for something real. Something real just definitely the fuck happened. And it was some of the wildest, craziest shit. And on top of that, I've known for a decade that this could happen to me. And not only that, I just touched it, right? I just dealt with death
Was it an
up
out
close
of
and
body
personal.
thing, or were you very much in the moment at the time
Oh
that
no,
happened?
I was locked in.
Yeah.
I was in the moment. And so dealing with that, it's like I had a real choice there, because law enforcement, you're not under contract. You can quit at any time.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's plenty of cops who see their first real shit and they're just like, fuck this, I'm out. This is crazy. And for me, I was like, Jesus hates a pussy. So I just kept doing my fucking job. And several years later and many more hardcore experiences later, the other coming of age moment was I did arrest a series of bad guys. I got into a foot pursuit with somebody who was really bad, and we ended up capturing him. And then also, I got into a fight on a guy who was hot. Wait, hold on. I
Yeah.
fought a guy who was on acid, and I won. And I fought a guy who was high on coke and booze,
And I
and I
lost.
won.
Oh, sorry.
No, I won. I
I was
won. No,
waiting.
and that was a fight. That was a good fight. And I won. And so after like pointing guns at people and getting into foot chases and getting into fist fights and all that kind of crap. Eventually, after a while, I was just like, all
I'm
right, I've
done.
done everything that
Yeah.
I needed to do to prove my own manhood to myself. And then I had my kid, and that we can get into fatherhood now.
Yeah. No.
When my son came out, the first words I said was, I need a new job. like I'm like I'm like shocked. I'm elated. I'm seeing my beautiful son, and that's the first thing that pops out of my head is I'm basically having a panic attack because I don't want to be dealing with hardcore shit and then taking care of my beautiful baby.
What did Mrs. Point say to that? As
She was like, yeah, she's like, yeah, you need a new fucking job. So anyways, no, being a father is incredible. Like if I do anything in this world, ever, like this YouTube shit, this could all explode. I don't want it to, but it could. This YouTube shit could all fall away, and being a father is so much more important than any of this shit. It actually, sorry, real quick, it blows away my military service compared to being a father. Dog shit. My law enforcement service compared to being a father. Dog shit. Being a father is the coolest thing I've ever done.
is it cool to see the mini you, or is it cool to see their dynamics? I mean, you have 3 kids, don't you? 3 boys.
I have 2, and
two.
I have 2, and we're thinking about a third. And
Oh
we're probably gonna have a
my
third.
god!
Yeah, and I have 2
Drama
boys.
announced here. Announced on Pisco Show exclusive. Exclusive.
No, I have 2 boys, and they're fantastic. The sorry, I want to like
Yeah.
encourage like anybody who watches this, if they're considering,
To
if they're like, I
breed.
kind of want to be a parent, do it. It's awesome. I'm exhausted. I'm tired all the time. I'm pissed off all the time. I'm frustrated all the time, but it is so cool. And so you're asking me what's cool about being a parent. Number one, birth is a biological miracle. It just is. It absolutely is. You have relations, and then magically a human being is created through that, and then the female body changes, like literally, like the hips like change position in order to have a child, and then you have a child, and your child is a clone of half of you and half of somebody you love. That's insane, and it's awesome. um I have like 10 other thousand things that I could say, but I'll shut up for a
The
second.
cloning aspect is my favorite. I'm a Warhammer.
It's awesome.
No, I know
It's so
that.
cool.
No, it must be fantastic. Does your son take a lot of personalities from you, and some from your wife, and so how do you?
But both of my boys.
Yeah. What do they have respectively
Both of
from
my
each
boys.
other?
Oh my god. So all right. So my first boy, blue eyes, same facial structure, had his mom's head. Mom had a little bit of a big head.
No, you didn't say that. She's not watching, is she?
Growing up. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if she is. She'll say it. She'll show you some middle school pictures. She'll be like, "Yeah, I had a little bit of a
No
5
way you said that. You're in trouble.
So, nah.
No
She'll
one
talk
clip
more
it.
shit
Be
than
a
I
bro.
will.
Yeah.
No, you can't. So, but my son has a little bit of a 5 head as well. But he's brilliant. He's so brilliant, and he's like, he's social, and he's fun, and he's weird, and he's sarcastic, and even as a baby he was like weirdly grumpy and mature. Like if you gave him food that he fucking hated, he would like glower at you with like the way that I glower at people sometimes. And also he's like really sarcastic and funny. He thinks farts and burps are the greatest, so like he'll run up and he'll fart. And then he loves karate, and he loves fighting, and he loves, being athletic and all that kind of stuff. And that's my first boy. And he's also like a social butterfly. He'll walk up to anybody and he'll talk to anybody about anything.
Is that from mom or is that from you? Because you seem pretty
That's
social.
both of us.
Yeah.
We're both social people. And so he'll walk up to people on the playground and be like, "Hey, you want to play?" And if the kid's like, "No," then he like literally walks 10 feet over and he's like, "Hey, you want to play?" And then he'll get somebody to say yes.
See, at my formative years, I couldn't handle that rejection when I was young.
Oh, he doesn't give a shit. He does not care at all. Not only will he take rejection on the chin, but he'll just keep going until eventually he gets what he wants. And it's not like a consent thing. He's very polite.
He gets informed consent to play.
He gets informed consent to play. He's very courteous.
Not toxically masculine like his father.
No, not at all. He's brilliantly kind, nice, charismatic, fun, intelligent. I love him. He's a good dude.
That's great.
And he's also really funny. And then my second boy.
How old are they?
Holy shit. So yeah, my first is 6. My second one is 1.5.
Oh my god.
1.5. Yeah.
They're babies.
So but my second is hilarious. So he's only a year and a half, so he hasn't had an opportunity to be extroverted, but he's not extroverted. He very much sticks to himself, but he loves danger. Anything dangerous. anything dangerous at all. If he's not interested in a toy, he's not interested in a Happy Meal, he's not interested in anything that's designed for him, he's not interested in it. Is it a fan that's going a million miles an hour that he can jam his fingers into? Is it an electrical socket that he can jam his fingers into? Is it a dishwasher that's filled with knives? Is it a
Suicide machine.
dog that he can grab the tail?
What kind of
Is
dog
it
do
a
you have?
couch? I have a 50-pound Sado and I have a 30-pound Brittany Spaniel dwarf,
Interesting dog
and
choice.
he harasses the crap out of them. He'll climb onto the highest peaks, the highest couch, the highest whatever. He'll climb onto the highest thing. There was a chair stuck up against the wall that was too tall for him, and so there was a burlap bag, like a grocery bag, that was hanging down.
Oh
He
no.
used it like a rope, like Indiana Jones, and he
Why?
pulled himself hand over hand onto the chair.
He's got that
Anyways,
marine in him.
dude, he's crazy, and it's great. It's beautiful. It's exhausting, and it's the best thing I've ever done.
That's wonderful to hear, and I'm glad. It really does sound like you juggle it, and it's certainly tiring. It seems to be a new parent, but it sounds like it's very endearing for you. Tell me about when did the wargaming start up, and are you excited to teach your kids this hobby that you love? And so that was the first thing that like kind of interested me about Connor. Like, oh, he has these hobbies. He has hobbies. I thought he just was a
No, I saw your
fascist.
reply.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw your reply where you were like, "Oh, what's this side of Connor?" And it was me
Yeah.
3D printing a bolter.
Yeah.
But so hold on, we'll do that. But sorry, there was one thing
Your
about
sons.
the kids.
Yeah. Do you want a girl? Can I ask if you have a third?
Yeah, if I have a girl, she'll be a Viking, so I won't care. Yeah, it's fine. I'll raise her like a boy. She can be a girl, and
Does
she can
Mrs. Points
do whatever she
want a
wants.
girl?
Yes. Yeah. So we both like, we know it's going to be a boy. There's like a 99% chance it's going to be a boy, but if it was a girl, neither one of us would be disappointed.
I'm one of 3 boys as well. So
Nice.
yeah.
Nice.
They happen. They come in threes. Anyway, sorry, you were going to say something about your children.
I can't remember, but I think in summary, for anybody who watches this, I would just say, like, if you're even remotely on the fence about having kids being a part of your life or whatever, do it. It's like the coolest shit you'll ever do. And it's cool to not be the main character anymore. Like, a lot of people, like, they make themselves the main character of their own lives, and that's like a huge pressure where you always have to be, what do I want, and what are my ambitions, and what am I going to do next, and all that kind of crap. And like, as soon as you have a kid, it's like, well, that was my story and it was pretty interesting and cool, but fuck it, I gotta make sure that they have cool stories. And so it's cool to get outside of your own head and look out for the welfare and future of somebody else.
Pass
I
the
remembered what I
torch.
was going to
Yeah,
talk
go
about.
for it. Yeah.
So balancing, you said like, oh, well, you're juggling it and it seems like you're having fun. Yeah, so I got some criticism because I yelled at Adam Friended the other day via telephone.
I saw that.
I was doing so while picking up my children.
Yeah.
My defense is that they said that they were going to be live 2 to 4. I said that I would like to be on at 3. We didn't plan it particularly well because I told them that the day of. Sitch said, "Hey, can you come on now?" Well, I pick up my children at 2:45. So from 2:45 to like 3:05, I'm calling Adam Friended a fucking illiterate moron.
Listen.
And I'm yelling at him and telling him to shut up.
I have so much to say about these losers, and I will in a second, and I will defend your honor.
Okay.
But yeah, okay. I didn't take that moment as you being a bad parent. I think that was
some people took issue with me yelling in front of my child. However,
Whatever.
I will assert that if my children do not know how to yell at other people properly, I will feel like I failed as a parent. So,
yeah, like you yell at your wife, is what you said.
Yes. No, like, dude, like she doesn't take it lying down. Like, that's the other thing. People are like, oh, you're yelling or you're being snappy or whatever. You think she fucking takes shit from me? No, she's talking it right back.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good that there's parity here. Thank you for the subs, Taze Grove. Appreciate that.
That's my editor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's Travis.
Wow,
He's a good dude.
Travis. Thank you, Trav.
He's a good dude.
Wait a second.
What?
1 second. Do not say a word. Do not say a word. I need to do something real quick. There's no way this is true. But literally, or you can say some words, but my attention is focused on something based on what you just said. There's no way.
Wait, I should say words or I shouldn't?
Yeah, you can say words. Sorry.
Yeah, no, Travis, Taze, He's a great dude. He's been helping me with the channel, I think, for at this point like 3 years. We have a system. It's working out really well. He's a good
Um,
dude.
where do I see this before? There's no way we have a mutual. Do we have a mutual?
Adam friended.
No. This person
Tasegrove?
Taze. There's no way, right?
No, I mean he's jumped onto some like open panels before. He's been on like
Oh.
Reverie and stuff.
No. Oh, I'm totally sorry. I thought we had an IRL mutual. We don't.
Oh,
Sorry.
he's in Arizona.
My bad.
Yeah,
There's a
it would be
similar.
weird.
It's a
The
similar
only
word. Okay, go there.
yeah the only mutuals you should have should be either through Twitch and YouTube poll or that's pretty much it.
Got it.
Really.
Okay, got it. Go ahead. Sorry, you were going to talk about the connection to wargaming, whether or not you're going to teach your kids that. When did you resume that?
Yes.
What's going on with that?
Okay.
And then we can touch on
yeah.
shit.
So what happened was in 2019, law enforcement was killing me. Like heartburn was terrible, stress was terrible.
People dying, people being crimed.
Literally just like seeing people's like brain matter and melted bodies from decomposition and shit. The job is hardcore, and like if you want an adventure as a young person, if you want to do some crazy shit or see some wild shit, I swear to God, the military is probably not where you want to be because it's too hardcore. Like war is too hardcore, and peacetime is lame. So law enforcement, on the other hand, or first response work or being an EMT or some shit, you'll see some crazy shit. You'll see amputations, you'll see decapitations, you'll see, brains, you'll see all sorts of crazy shit. So anyways, so it was too hardcore for me. It was killing me slowly. I had a couple of bad calls. I lost a kid. I lost some puppies. Just really bad calls that like fucked up my brain. And my wife was like, "Hey, this job is killing you. You need to get out of it." And so we fought about that for about 6 months, where I didn't want to quit because I didn't want to be a pussy and I didn't want to leave the job that I did love the job, and I still do, but it was killing me. So I did drop out. I started doing insurance adjusting, which is just an administrative job. Is boring as shit. And I needed a way to decompress from basically a decade, I would say, of security service.
Yeah.
And so the easiest way to decompress, or the coolest way to decompress, I was like, oh shit, I'm an adult with money now. Whenever I asked my parents to buy me Warhammer, they would buy me like 5 dudes for $30 and a spray paint can, and then they'd tell me to go fuck myself. I can buy Warhammer now. And so I started buying Warhammer.
As an adult, this is post police.
This is post police, post military, post college degree. I was like, oh shit, I can afford my own toys. And so, I'm not rich or anything. As a matter of fact, I probably should have, spent my money on other stuff. But I got this, and it was really cathartic. And the reason why is because if you look at Warhammer miniatures, they're little 28 to 32 millimeter soldiers about yay big. They have like vehicles and all sorts of crazy stuff. There's lore for
they
everything.
Have Titans.
Titans are amazing.
I saw a painter. Really cool. I followed a painter because I wanted to prepare for this. His name is Eons of Battle.
Yes.
You know him?
Yes. I watch Eons.
But you don't know him personally. You just know of him.
I don't know him personally.
Okay.
I'm subscribed to his channel. I watch his content.
He had the something Titan, and he like won something. I don't know, but it was very cool. But most of the miniatures are smaller.
Yeah, and it's a walking war machine. It's wildly expensive. It's like $50 for 5 guys, or $80 for like
unpainted
10 guys. Yeah, unpainted, and then you spend 3 hours of your life painting each dude if you want to be really detailed about it. And so this is representative of like weeks or months worth of work. And but I did it, and it was very like cathartic because on one hand, you have to engage your brain in a way where you're being very detailed. You're doing like edge highlighting, where there's like a single, like there's a side of armor that you need to paint with like a light color in order to make it shine slightly brighter.
Yeah.
So you're doing stuff like that, which involves like a lot of intention, but it's also very like meditative. Like you can let your brain kind of like relax in the back and process thoughts and all that kind of stuff.
What's your faction? Or do you have more than one?
Death Watch.
Death Watch. Is that an Empire faction?
Yeah, it's Imperial. So okay. I have Death Watch right here. I have Necrons right here. There's only like 5 dudes, and then I have Imperial Guard right here. The goal is to fill these cabinets. With Warhammer miniatures.
Those aren't detolfs, are they? Those are just shelves.
Yeah, these are just shelves.
Yeah.
And then up here, I have a chainsaw, which will be a chainsaw sword. I have the bolter that is
which
functional
works.
that
It's
I
a real
made.
gun.
It's a real gun.
Why isn't it
The
locked somewhere where your children can't get to it?
Because there's no the ammunition is locked,
Okay,
so it's on
see,
display.
I got it.
And then here is a skull and a torso that
What?
I 3D printed. I'm going to be 3D printing the remainder of the torso, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use silicone as flesh, and I'm going to make. Have you ever seen MythBusters or Deadliest Warrior?
Yes, I've seen both.
So they have the ballistic gelatin torsos. So
You're
those
gonna
things
make one
are
of those.
Yes, so those are $2,000. So I'm gonna try to make it for 200
$2,000 a pop
for
for the ballistic gel
yeah.
torsos.
It's like $1,500 for the torso,
Jesus.
and it's like 800 for just the skull and the shoulders.
And this is
So
to test your weaponry.
yeah, so I'm gonna 3D print the ballistic gelatin, and I'm gonna use silicone instead of gelatin, and then I'm gonna blow it up with various science fiction weapons. And that's my hobby now.
And that's why you're not gonna vote for Kamala, because she's gonna ban.
Yeah, she's gonna kill my business.
So we got to the meat and potatoes of it.
The heart of the matter.
That is so fast. Do you don't actually play the game that much?
No, I play the game.
Oh, you do play the game. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's not all the time. I probably in the past like 3 years I probably played like half a dozen or a dozen games.
In the past
It's
years,
like once every it's once every few months I play a game.
Got it. That is so interesting to me. So this was a way for you to decompress. The way for you to decompress after a warlike atmosphere, either at work or a monotonous situation with the insurance stuff, was to do a kind of meditative style painting of very war lore based characters and factions, and that was a way for you to blow off steam.
That's the beauty of it too, is Warhammer at its best. There's a fantastic author by the name of Dan Abnett, and he takes realistic war tactics, psychology, relationships, etc., and he sets it in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. And a lot of what he's very similar to George R. R. Martin, who wrote Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
where he'll make you fall in love with a character, and then he'll just kill them in the most like either in like a totally random way
Like a
that
banal
feels
way,
fitting because war's random, or in like the most like tragic fulfilling character arc way that's ever been uttered, and there's like tears streaming down your face over a dead character who's never existed, but it's so well written that it's beautiful. And that's Warhammer at its best.
And you're a lore guy as well as a kind of painting meditative guy. You care about the world in addition to your creative pursuits under the world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so what I did is I was doing everything 2 or 3 years ago for content. Just anything that popped into my head I wanted to do, I did it. And so what I did was that ended up being really successful really quick was I started breaking down Warhammer animations. So they started creating cartoons and animations about this universe. And they were really successful and popular. And so I just started watching them and pausing intermittently and then giving like a 5-minute rant of all the context information that you would need to understand what the hell was going on if you were a new person. And Games Workshop and I, the original creators, they didn't like that I was showing off too much of their content. So we struck about.
Oh, you actually negotiated it with them.
Yeah. They're not entirely happy with our negotiation, but I think we struck a middle ground between their concerns and my concerns. And so now what I do is I take their animation products and also fan-made products. I chop out 30% of it, and then I break it down with lore. And so far, that's been wildly successful.
Man. You know, if anyone comes after you, give me a call, bro. No, that is fast, and that's blowing up. So you have that going on, and you decided to be. Now, is there any kind of residual embarrassment? Like at first, were you a little bit nervous and shy about like, hey, this game is perceived by some, because you're a very confident guy, and so like you weren't gonna make apologies about
here's the other thing. This is a great thing. We were talking about masculinity earlier, and like, is this is this exterior masculinity that you're imposing on yourself, or is this interior masculinity that you're
Yeah.
trying to prove to yourself? Once you prove yourself to yourself, you don't give a fuck about anybody else's opinion anymore. That's one
Yeah.
of the best things about it is once you set a bunch of ambitions and then you pursue them and then you achieve them and then you like continue to flower or grow as a person. But once you've achieved a certain amount of things, you don't care about other people's opinions anymore, because everyone has advice on how you should be living your life. And then
Yeah.
once you achieve those things, you're like, fuck you. You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know how I should live my life.
Once you become a real Garviel Loken, um,
One of my favorite characters, by the way.
oh yeah, what is it
Yeah.
about Garviel that you find very, um, I don't know, interesting?
Listen, it's 2:30. Do you want to stay up until 6 a.m.?
Oh, sorry, no,
So
no.
the no, I'm kidding. The no, and I'll probably, in fairness, I'll probably run for like another 30 minutes
Okay,
and then I'll
cool.
wrap up.
Yeah.
The no, Garviel Loken, what I admire about him, he's one of the first characters you get introduced to in the book series known as the Horus Heresy, is that he is a principled person who loves his father figure
Uh-huh.
and his brothers, and he's very competent and intelligent and vicious and a good soldier. But what happens is the principles that he's fighting for, he earnestly believes, and he sees his brothers and his father become corrupted by their own ambitions and virtues that are completely contradictory to everything he signed up for. And instead of going, there's an incredible amount of social pressure on him to go with his brothers and go with his father on this path to damnation. And he tells them to fuck themselves, and he almost dies as a result. And he suffers some of the worst betrayals that you can possibly imagine. And yet he is always steadfast to his principles. It's like
Is he part
really
of the heresy,
tragic.
or does he support the
Yes.
God Emperor?
No, he supports the God. Well, he's not the God Emperor at the time, but he supports the Emperor of Mankind.
So he isn't part of the heresy.
No, he's a loyalist.
Okay, because the heresy were like the disciple guys who turned away, right?
Yeah, so
I'm sure.
not to get like crazy into detail, I do have videos on this,
Okay,
but
I'll watch the videos.
basically, no, the emperor starts out as atheist space Jesus.
Yeah.
So he doesn't believe in gods. He doesn't want humanity to believe in gods, and so he's trying to conquer the entire galaxy and bring them under his control. And it's supposed to be this like enlightenment vision of what humanity can be, but then it turns out that there's demons and gods in the
Yeah.
world, and they corrupt half of his sons, and it causes a really terrible civil war that destroys the galaxy.
Yeah. And so, okay, perfect. That I will look into the videos, the introduction of Victor. I watched a few of them, but there's a lot going on.
I'll send you the
yes.
unified timeline one. It's really
Perfect.
easy.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that one. And it's I think it's a really nice transition because for the last part of what we're talking about, we have that channel which is going very well for you, very popular. And then on a separate channel, you speak about your own fascist vision for America. And so so tell me about the politics, and then do that quickly because I do want to get into the Sitch and Adam and the recent conversations. I am going to watch it. Shut up.
So Counterfire, obviously, like so what happened was I had all of the content on one channel, and it was a mess, right? Algorithm had no idea what to do with me. So eventually, a gentleman said, "Hey Connor, you're running a Chick-fil-A, and everybody is asking you for Chick-fil-A sandwiches, and you keep trying to sell them cheeseburgers and steaks. Stop trying to sell them cheeseburger and steaks and just serve them Chick-fil-A." And so I was like, all right, fuck it. You're right. And so I just started doing Warhammer content on the main channel. That's my Chick-fil-A, right? And then on the other channel, I've been in Twitch and YouTube politics since 2019, basically.
Yeah.
And so I spam posted all of my old content, got like 60 views for all of that stuff. I did 2 well-received essays that boosted me up to 3,000 subscribers. And then now I just started reposting my and Brianna Wu's show. We do like a weekly show, or we try to anyways, but that's obviously like she's very busy, I'm very busy. And then also I post all the Twitch and YouTube political debates. So my just showing some level of self-awareness. That channel right now is schizophrenic. There is not consistency in content. And I know that in order for a channel to have like long-term algorithmic growth, you have to serve approximately the same product over and over again. We're not doing that at this time. I'm thinking about how to do that where Brianna can have a good time. I can have a good time. The editor makes money, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But we're still in the infancy of like, how do we do this properly?
No, I really appreciate that. If you were to have to post this VOD in one of those channels, would this be a Counterfire VOD?
Yeah.
Or would it be a Counterpoints VOD? Not because we don't really go into Warhammer that much. We spend
No,
most of the time.
it'd be a Counterfire video for
Got
sure.
it. Perfect. Okay. I feel, first of all, thank you so much for walking through your life in broad strokes. I'm sure there's a lot of detail that we've missed, and so I don't want this doesn't encapsulate you, and I'm sure there's a lot of detail we overlooked, but I felt like I got some good chunks out of everything you said. I
That's
really
a pretty good
appreciate
picture.
that. But I now that let's get into the meat and potatoes. You're a real
Yeah,
person.
we still got to do
You're
like,
a real guy. Good.
well, we still have to do, yeah, and that's what I was thinking is like, we probably don't have time for this
Yeah.
tonight. We can talk about Sitch and Adam.
Yeah.
But I think that you, I, and maybe eventually Destiny and Loner Box, we need to talk about like what are the origins of power and governance and like all that kind of stuff, because we have like wildly diverging views
Sure.
on that stuff. But anyway, sorry. If
So,
you want to do
okay,
Sitch and Adam
let's
drama,
do
that's
Sitch and
honestly
Adam.
going to be the cherry on top.
Yeah, let's do Sitch and Adam. The people want it, and then we can end. All right.
Okay.
Here's my thought process on everything.
Mhm.
Counterpoints did nothing wrong. And here's why I think that. Because I think Adam is a coward piece of crap. I first of all, I find Adam very funny, but when he is coming at you for misrepresenting his views about his Trump support, you were totally on point with what the problem was. Here's what the problem was, Adam, and the one that you won't address. And you'll never have someone to actually talk this topic, because what you want to do is you want to talk about the whole audience capture thing, because those are conversations that you're more comfortable in, where you can make these kinds of bombastic statements and go after people's character and call them losers. The conversation you don't want to have, and where Connor's absolutely correct, is you made statements saying, I can't vote for Trump again, not after he tried to coup the government. It doesn't matter. I'll never vote for Trump again. And then enter Joe Biden. He has some difficulties that we've all, acknowledged. And you say, I have to qualify my previous statements. There's a new danger. A new danger has entered. That danger is the black box, the deep state black box, which now, who knows? If I vote for Joe Biden, there's a much greater danger than the danger that the guy who tried to steal the republic is. Buy that. Accept that vision of what the danger is, that Joe Biden is in fact a greater danger because of the black box. It's absurd. You should never grant it. It's a dumb argument, but grant it for the purpose of this discussion. Joe Biden drops out. You're an undecided voter, in the sense, not in the counterpoint sense where I might not vote at all, in the sense of I might vote for Trump. Given everything you've said, that's the hypocrisy. When you said the statements, or the wild change in position where you were under no circumstances going to vote for Trump, given the danger he represented, and then the Joe Biden situation comes up, he drops out, and all of a sudden there's another thing to consider. Now it's about housing. Now it's about who's going to provide what's the Adam Yang, the Yang policy, the
What, UBI?
UBI. Now I care about the policy. It wasn't about those policies before, but before it was an existential conversation. You've totally shifted gears, and now all of a sudden, when the candidate drops that you said was the black box reason, you found conveniently a new reason to be undecided. That is evidence that points towards hypocrisy and audience capture. Any reasonable person would say so. Connor did nothing wrong.
Well, okay. So I get that, like, people talk out of school or whatever. You can get pissed when people are shit talking you on a different program. That's totally fine. And I have no problem with Adam getting mad. What I do have problems with is answer the fucking question, right? Like,
He
what's your
won't.
position and
Yeah.
why, right? And then, well, and here's the other thing. So this is one of Adam's defenses that I just don't agree with. Is he was like, well, I'm in California. And why does it matter?
Fuck
Why do you guys
outta here.
care? Why
You
do you guys
cared enough to
care
make
how
the
I vote?
statement initially. When I asked you
Well-
who you're going to vote for, you cared enough to say, right now I'm leaning Trump. You cared enough to say that Trump is an insurrection, I won't vote for him. And that's such a cop-out to say California. It's bullshit. It's not even worth addressing, to be frank.
But okay, well, the reason why I'm going to address it is because some of his fans might want it to be addressed.
Fair.
So here's the thing. I get it. We're all very small, right? All of us have, a few hundred, maybe a few thousand live
Yeah.
viewers if you're talking about the bigger channels. We got a few thousand subs, whatever. I get it. It's all small. But Sitch and Adam, I would say, if you think about centrist creators, there's probably like, I don't know, half a dozen, right? It's like Tim Pool, and I can't even think of like another Phil Labonte,
But
Dave Smith,
you're,
the
you're you're
libertarian,
calling all these people centrists, just to be fair. And by the way,
which
I
is
would call
probably
them
not
all.
accurate.
But
I'm getting tired.
just no.
But yeah,
That's all fair, because I think there are people who might call them centrists. I would call them MAGA extremists. But just continue, please.
well, maybe they're closet MAGA, but then they get pissed when they say that. And by the way, like what is it? Adam said that he was Kamala curious because he heard her speech the other night or
Fuck
something
out
like
of
that.
here. Given what you previously
So
said, it just doesn't make sense. Sorry, keep interrupting.
well, no. So my thing is, this is actually what I want to articulate. And Dylan Burns had this beautiful clip that I wish we could have watched. If we were having like a calm conversation amongst friends who were capable of taking and giving jabs, Pisco and I have said that some of the rudest shit
Oh my
possible to each
god.
other in debates. And yet we're here able to have a conversation. But you say audience captured once about fucking Adam and he can't fucking take it.
Yeah, let it
So
go. You guys are, I mean, honestly, let it go. You know how often people call counterpoints fascist, like a reactionary, even a Trump supporter, even though he comes out and say that. Or on the other side, they call him a lib, a dem, a literal communist. I think Gibbs called you a communist. PV Shill. Like
Gibbs doesn't know what communism is, though. So
you're not going to exile Gibb. You're not. You haven't exiled Rob Noor. I mean, just get over yourself.
I'll see them on a panel sometime in the next couple of weeks. So so hold on. So with that though, with all that being said, like audiences, right? So there's a bellwether in the like a flag that points in the direction that the wind is blowing, right? And what was happening was the wind was kind of blowing after like January 6th, where it was like Trump really fucked up. January 6th was huge. Anyone who's kind of a moderate who is not a Trump cultist should avoid him like the plague. That's what the flag was doing. And then what ended up happening was over the past 2 or 3 years, Trump hasn't really been taken down by a criminal indictment or a legal suit or whatever to the point that he's no longer a viable candidate. Somehow, despite all these controversies, he's still a viable candidate.
Wow.
And so the bellwether started being like contrarian, where it was like, well, maybe the deep state is evil and maybe Trump is like the 4D chess vote again. And so the flag started drifting that way. And then what happened was Biden had a very bad debate, right?
Yeah.
And so the flag started blowing all the way for Trump. It's like, oh, Biden's brain is mush and he's going to accidentally nuke the planet and he's going to do brinksmanship with Israel and Ukraine. And actually, the safest thing we can do is get Trump in office. And so a lot of centrists started drifting towards Trump again, ignoring everything that had happened over the past 2 or 3 years. And then finally, Kamala gets in. And so, Kamala, if you don't care about guns and you're a liberal who likes abortion and you kind of want to have like a centristy tax policy or whatever, or like you don't care about taxes for the uber rich or whatever, Kamala should be your girl. It should be like putting on.
She's proposing tax cuts in her DNC speech
For like the middle class or whatever. Yeah. It was basically a Republican speech except for gun control and abortion. Those were the two things that were like solid Democrat, and the rest of it was like patriotism, America.
A vast majority of Americans support an assault weapons ban. But yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Anyways, do they? Isn't it like 53% to 47? Anyways, the point is like for anyone who's like a liberal, right? Like you care about liberal policies, Kamala should be like a nice pair of slippers to slip into. And so the fact that it's still kind of like, oh, I don't know, like that to me,
it makes no sense.
Like, you know that you would piss off your audience. That's why you don't want to say, I'm a liberal. I like abortion. I think Republicans went too far. Trump's an asshole.
Because you couldn't ever see them standing a candidate. Because if they're standing a candidate, they're not above it all, and they want to be above it all, and they want to feel smarter than you. And so us who are taking a side, well, we'll talk later, not today, about your bullshit and the gun stuff. We'll talk later. We'll talk later about it. But at the very least, you're taking a side in the sense of, you're not voting for Trump. We're worse. We're suckers. We're this or that, or we're shills. And I think that is absolutely the opposite. You guys are shills to your own audience and to the notion that you are above it all and you're smarter and you're better than everyone, except you're not. Because when you look at your rationale, when you care to even offer it, and when we cut it into pieces, the truth is you were not clipped out of context in any of the clips that I provided. I provided the context of what exactly you were saying, and you were saying
The
all the same
5-minute clip
shit.
wasn't even bad. It wasn't even bad. It like you might have had a hyperbolic thing. You're like a fucking pit bull on Twitter.
I
But the
editorialize.
but the clip, okay, but the clip from my view, and this is something that I asked him on the day of, and I get it, like Hutch and you were fucking shitting on him or whatever, so he wasn't in the mood to entertain questions. However, what he was saying in the clip, if I remember correctly, was it was essentially a 5-minute clip where he's like, "Hey, listen, I think Biden is not a strong candidate. I have XYZ ABC concern. Therefore, I'm going to be evaluating both candidates on policy." And I literally asked him, I was like, are you saying that you would potentially vote for Trump based off of policy? And the reason why I asked that with like a I don't know, an angry tone is because Trump doesn't know what Trump's policies are. He literally says some shit at fucking 8 a.m. and he changes his mind by 2 p.m. And if people shit on him on Twitter enough about a certain policy, then he changes his mind to whatever the people on Twitter are saying. Like Trump, analyzing Trump based off of policy doesn't make any gosh darn sense.
And it's kind of a debunk of the black box, because to the extent that Joe Biden is a black box because he's old, although I think his administration has been insanely predictable in every sense of the word. He's doing what.
Oh, do you know what my favorite thing? I don't want to shit on specifically Adam and Sitch forever, but do you know what my favorite criticism of Kamala is, or Kamala, however you pronounce it, is? We don't know her policies. It's like, bro, it's gonna be mainline Democrat policies.
Yeah, it's so
That's
obvious.
what it's gonna be.
She's literally referencing specific acts of legislation. You guys acting like you're there's no
like you need it on the website in order to know what a Democrat president is gonna do. Are you shitting me? You haven't heard Democrats talk about Democratic policies for the past 30 or 40 years of your life?
Oh, because
it's an enigma.
Imagine that he comes out and says, "Yeah, I'm gonna vote for Kamala." He wouldn't do that because he wants to stroke his own ego. And the truth is, when you were asking that question, it wasn't.
Are you playing 4D chess in order to get him to do that? That way he proves you wrong.
Really, he's easy to manipulate in that sense. Because or he's easy to push when he's in at least some receptive mood. And that's maybe why he doesn't want to talk to us anymore, which is a wimp move. We've said some horrible shit about you. You brought it up. We've said some really bad things. I've said bad things about Destiny. I've said some bad things about you. I've said some bad things about Rob Norr. We still talk to each other. We're still like colleagues, I guess, in this space. When you asked that question, the question almost was a courtesy, because the implication is obvious. The implication is, before your statements suggested this was an existential fight for base principles related to stealing the election, democracy, stability of institutions. That was also your rationale, by the way, for Joe Biden in the black box. And now it's changed to a policy conversation about housing and Kamala Curious or whatever the hell you're saying. That is an inconsistency that needs to be called out, or an apparent inconsistency that needs to be explained.
So a lot of people, what Adam Stans have said is that he likes to consider the shower thoughts of everything all the time, which is why you can't get consistency out of him. But then this is my thing, is like, this is a fundamental weakness in the Twitch and YouTube political space. Like, I get it. They're commentators. They're not debaters. They like to run a comedy show. And by the way, I still like Sitch a lot. I don't know if he still likes me, but I like Sitch.
Sitch hates me for some reason more than you. I don't understand the basis of that.
Well,
maybe because
you're
I'm
very rude and abrasive on Twitter,
I guess.
So, but
he is. Wait. He is too. He's a dick on Twitter to people he doesn't like, and they talk all kinds of shit to other people. When he was talking to me, he was like, "But we were friends. We were chummy. We were this and that. So it's different between us." But now he's like, he's painting like, and so what I said was like, "Oh, I'm sorry," to the extent that like, and I was just trying to mend a bridge, like to the extent that you had this idea that we were like very close and we were like colleagues and all that stuff. I could have done it a different way. It was but that wasn't good enough for him. It's not good enough for them, because deep down, I think that they love talking shit and they don't like to be talked back to. And that's why they obsessed over anytime anyone says anything, they can't let it go.
But see, that's the thing, is I think that the space well, hold on. So actually you just hit on the point, so I'm just going to repeat it.
Yeah.
Is politics is essentially the analysis and argument for who wields power. That's what it is. Those are going to be they are inherently contentious subjects, and they're also imbued with like grave consequence. Now, I'm not saying that anyone here is like responsible for what happens in Ukraine or Israel or whatever.
But there's small spheres of influence that we're influencing some people.
No, dozens, maybe hundreds, maybe even a few thousand. If you include Destiny within this sphere, there are thousands of people who might not have their votes changed based off of what's going on, but they pay attention and they form their opinions based off of what happens in Twitch and YouTube politics. Right now, you can say that's dumb, but it's true.
Or it's small,
And
but yeah, it's true.
yeah, and so for me, if you're gonna comment on an inherently like conflicted topic, then you need to be able to, at minimum, articulate your ideas and why you believe them, and you should to some degree be able to defend them. And if you're not prepared to do that, you don't have any
Then get the hell
fucking
out.
business talking
Then get
about
the
it,
hell out. I mean,
because
you didn't have to
it's
answer when I asked you
literally
who
a
you're going to vote for.
contentious
Yes,
topic.
yeah. You just said I would rather vote for Trump in this moment over Biden. People are gonna. There's no capacity for surprise that people are gonna call you on that. People are gonna call you scummy and shitty, and you're gonna need. You know that you are when you say that you're currying criticism, and you're gonna have to explain yourself, or at least be content with people calling you shills unless you do. And the fact that you're not able to either speaks to a profound lack of justification or foundation or internal consistency, or two, the most limp dick, weak, just petty attitude, or really just kind of unrealistic expectations of what the commentary scene that you occupy is like. And I
Well,
can't have it.
and
It's just
no,
petty.
so my thing is, I don't give a fuck if you I don't care if somebody disagrees with me, right? Like I disagree with Rob all the time. I disagree with you, obviously.
Yeah.
Disagree with Destiny. Disagree with so many people. What I care about is whether or not you can articulate your arguments and then back them up in like a coherent manner. I might not agree with your outcomes. I might not even agree with your supporting positions, but at least I understand it as like almost founded in some level of reality that I find plausible. And so as a result, I can be like, okay, I completely disagree. Here's the foundational facts that I disagree on. Here's the outcome that I disagree on. But I at least understand your perspective. Therefore, I'm not going to call you a moron or an idiot or a dipshit or a piece of
Yeah.
shit or whatever. But if you can't do that, then I am going to be mean. And it is personal in a way because these things affect. So let's say, right. Let's say that Twitch and YouTube politics has a minor but real influence on the way that people vote and view politics. And let's say that some candidates seize power. The way that these people seize power and have impact in the world is deadly fucking serious.
Sure.
So if Trump withdraws aid from Ukraine and the Kursk offensive and the southeastern defensive perimeter collapse, that's tens of thousands of Ukrainians dead defending their home territory. In Israel Palestine, if Trump seizes power and or gets elected or whatever, I'm not trying to be cute. If Trump's in charge and he gives Israel carte blanche to do whatever they want with the Palestinians, and they just start massacring Palestinians, knowing that they got the full backing of the United States of America, that's tens of thousands of dead people. If we have another pandemic disease, God forbid, and we have another fumbled approach to a pandemic disease, that's tens of thousands of people dead. So we can talk about in abstractions, and ultimately, I think Chud Logic is right to an extent, where a lot of this does boil down to entertainment and money and viewership and all that kind of crap. But what we're talking about actually does result in people's lives and deaths.
Yeah. No. Of course, it's of great magnitude, and
So have an opinion
yeah,
and back it.
have an opinion, back it, like back yourself. But this kind of like doing it and being offended at everyone, and really now just burning the bridge with like a bunch of people who, you know, not that we matter a lot, but like think about everyone he's burned the bridge with. You, Destiny, Hutch, Josiah, all these people, and they're blaming us. They're saying we're pushing you into the arms of the MAGA or the conservatives, and they're saying like you made us do this. It's the weakest
Well,
way to pass off agency and
when
not stand tall.
when I spoke with them,
Yeah,
they were saying that they were way more open-minded than anybody in the liberal sphere gives them credit for, that they're not Trump sycophants, that they're not catering to their audience, et cetera, et cetera. They're keeping their minds open. Sitch, to in my opinion, I think whenever I challenge Sitch on something, he can typically at least walk me through his logic chain of how he got where he got. With Adam though, that conversation, somebody was trying to get me to like I don't want to say mend the bridge with Adam, but he was saying like this is how you could mend the bridge with Adam or whatever.
I think Sitch is
And I was thinking to
incredibly
myself,
overrated. I think he's pretty stupid, to be honest with you. And I mean, obviously Adam
rude.
is dumber in my.
He's a member of the tribe.
I'm sorry. Sorry. The bridge is already burned. I'm just telling you what I think. And I
Okay.
think that so I think Sitch is grossly overrated. And they accused you of lying, unable to provide a specific thing that you lied about, unable to justify that
But
at
dude,
all.
so hold
Accused
on.
me
So
of lying.
that's
Same thing.
that's what I was gonna say is like so accusing me of dishonesty and simping for Destiny because I said that I think they were audience captured. Oh, and this actually brings us back to a point. Dylan Burns had this beautiful clip where he was talking about you can start streaming and have a plan for the exact kind of content that you want to make and all that kind of stuff. But what happens is drama intensifies your metrics automatically. You'll see a 30% boost, 40% boost. You'll see more donos, more subscribers, et cetera, et cetera. And so Dylan was kind of disgusted with that because he did set out to do like a political debate show, but by the end of it, it was just all drama, right?
Right.
And so now he's trying to find the balance between the two. But Chud Logic is another perfect example. I love Chud. I watch Chud's content or whatever, but he's pure drama now, whereas he used to be politics and drama.
Yeah.
And so there's a perverse incentive structure, and I would call that a version of audience capture that is not dishonest. I don't think of Chud Logic as dishonest because he caters to drama. I don't think of Dylan Burns as dishonest because he caters to drama and politics. And I don't think you might defer
Yeah.
on me on this. I don't think of Adam as dishonest because he's actively lying about his internal perspectives, but I think he's considering retarded perspectives that are presented from his audience because he knows that that is like what's going to play. And so there's an entire I talked to them about this during the conversation where I was like, there is a reflexive contrarian streak in centrism that whenever there is something that's presented as like the main idea, you have to find a reason why that's stupid, and you have to come up with a reason why the alternative
They have
is
to be
better.
above it. They have to be above it. They have to.
But that's not reality.
Yeah.
Sometimes the contrarian perspective is correct, and sometimes the mainstream perspective is correct, and it's up to you as an intelligent individual to evaluate which one of those cases are, not to always go for the contrarian streak.
They're Eugene O'Neill lamenting the end of society and watching it. They have no stake in it. They're not interested parties in what's going on. That's why you never get a tangible sense of their role in these things. And there's kind of these abstract notions of the policies they agree with and these kinds of social issues that can't possibly affect them in any concrete sense because they're too
There's
marginal.
a term. There's a term, and I'm forgetting it, but it's like politics is luxury or something like that.
Yeah, they don't
And
really.
so,
Yeah, good.
well, all I was going to say is I think I probably engage in this to a degree where, so for instance, like firearms, right? Like firearms is almost a politics of luxury, right? Because for a lot of other people, they're worried about whether or not the social programs that they need in order to survive are going to survive a Trump presidency. They're worried about whether or not the Department of Education is going to survive a Trump presidency. They're worried about whether or not the foreign support, which honestly that might override the Second Amendment. Like literally, like foreign geopolitical shit might override my Second Amendment.
Glad to hear it.
Just because I do care about that a lot. And so, and anyways, but the point is that
you're
like,
mulling it over. I'm not trying to shame you. You're a Republican.
we'll think about it.
Yeah.
We'll think about it. So but the point is that like guns ultimately, like I still believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in the balance of power and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like even if the Democrats get shit through, am I going to be able to defend my home with firearms? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like am I going to be able to own firearms? Yeah.
And this Supreme Court is going to defend your right. I mean, the Supreme Court just had one of the most pro-gun. Guns have essentially
you want to
more
courts and shit.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that it's going to fundamentally change. You're not going to be able to get a ton of new justices, and that's not going to pass. That's the other reason why this is also stupid because it's never going to pass. But you have Bruin, which is arguably more protection for the Second Amendment than like the First Amendment gets. It's more protection than like any other right gets with this Supreme Court. And so I don't see the danger even to the Second Amendment as you conceive of it. But anyway, that's aside.
Actually, I wouldn't mind hitting that and then kind of wrapping up.
Yeah, let's do it.
So for me, we don't have to do it big tonight. We can do it big another night, and we should have a conversation again about like power. Where does it come from? What's the difference between like law, legislation, government, firearms, civilians versus the state, et cetera, et cetera. We should have a bigger conversation about that. But for me, what it boils down to is there's a principle here that I believe is like foundational to civilized society. I literally think that the balance of power between the state and the civilians when it comes to private arms is kind of what keeps a stable, free society. And so when we're talking about gun control getting through and it being as fragile, I guess, as a few Supreme Court justices having heart attacks, I know we're in a strong position, right? I know we're in a strong position.
Yeah.
But if a couple of 70-year-olds have some heart attacks and a couple of progressive justices get in there and then they take a revenge mindset in reference to Roe versus Wade or some of the excesses of the court in recent years, then if you find the Trump executive ruling to be absurd and insane and conservative, uh, I don't know, legislation from the bench, and if you also consider what was the other one, Roe versus Wade,
Yeah.
if you consider that a power grab by conservatives, all it would really take is an inversion of those power dynamics, and then boom, something that I really care about, I enabled to fuck me.
Yeah, I have some responses to that. Number one, the question of any right. No right is absolute in the American context, either because um, the right as originally conceived doesn't include the thing. So, for example, for First Amendment, defamation is not protected. Defamation is just not a protected, recognized thing under the First Amendment. Same thing with quote unquote fighting words. Same thing with true threats. Those are just categorically unprotected forms of speech.
Yeah.
There's the scope of the right there. So that's number one. But even if for things that are inarguably, thank you for the sub, guys. Even things that are inarguably encompassed by the right, sometimes there'll be a circumstance such that the government can intrude. That's the kind of tiers of scrutiny analysis. So the example that a classic example might be, you have the right to go to public spaces. But now think of like a true pandemic where you have people dying. If there is a sufficiently compelling reason, courts have recognized a form of analysis where the government has a high burden, but even for things that are subsumed in the right, they're allowed to try to meet that burden and show that the regulation is narrowly tailored to that end. There was some of that in the recent case called Rahimi. This was a case where, like, okay, we have gun rights. The gun rights extend to individuals who are under some kind of domestic order, where they're a threat of abuse to somebody who's like a protective order. Well, what's the answer to that, right? Like, does the second all the Second Amendment says is that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Surely that's never been understood to mean no thing can infringe. We're allowed to have certain licensing schemes. No one seems to have an issue that you register. There's a federal gun registry. I don't think that you're a person to be like, you have the right to personally own nukes, and no other right works like that in our entire framework of documents. So anyway, I'll finish this and let you respond. It seems abnormal for the Second Amendment to be a right above everything else, in the sense of having this absolute protection that not even the First Amendment, not even the Fourth Amendment. Think about the Fourth Amendment, right? Fourth Amendment says, and the Fourth Amendment, no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, and there should be no unreasonable searches and seizures. A search and seizure is deemed to be unreasonable. Um, Typically, the normal rule is if you don't have a warrant, it is de facto unreasonable. But the courts have invented all of these exceptions: hot pursuit, plain sight, consent, auto vehicle exception. They were thinking about that before auto vehicle. So, like, no one, but the Fourth Amendment rights, like, it's one of the most foundational freedoms against general warrants
And
by
yet
the English.
we found all the
Yes,
loopholes
and we
for
have
it.
all the
Yeah.
loopholes. So no other right works. So when I hear the assault weapons ban, I think that there needs to be a case made that this transgresses from the a reasonable restriction within the anticipation of the Second Amendment, which we leave to the courts, which are very conservative in your favor.
Mhm.
Past that into this is undermining the very structures of our society because it's too broad. And that's the case I think that I would want you to make to get me on board.
Well, and that's the thing. I don't expect to
Get me on board.
get you. Oh, yeah, no, I really don't.
Yeah.
The thing. So, and by the way, here's the thing: is I actually feel like I could serve a gun control argument to gun control proponents
Opponents or
on a
proponents?
proponents
Okay.
on a silver platter. So when you look at the right, a or excuse me, yeah, I'm tired, so you're gonna have to
Yeah.
forgive me. But a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people
Keep
to
and
keep and
bear
bear
arms.
arms shall not be
Yep.
infringed.
Hmm.
So we're not specifying the type of arms. And on top of that, there are the a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Right there, the purpose of it is to maintain a well-regulated militia. And then with a well-regulated militia, if you look at the context for the time, it's well trained, right? And when you look at skills that are required for combat, military, law enforcement, whatever, you're talking about a few basic things. You're talking about marksmanship, you're talking about like room clearing, you're talking about tactics, you're talking about communication, you're talking about a whole bunch of things.
Hmm.
And those skills are not diminished, they're only slightly diminished by or enhanced by the technologies that you use for the firearms. And so, as an example, I could train a well regulated militia if you made me in charge of training adult males 18 to 45 and females as a member of the National Guard. If you made me responsible to get them up to almost military standards with skills, I could do that with 19th century technology. I could do that with revolvers, lever actions, and pump guns, and I could make them 60 to 70% as efficient as a military unit. And so the question becomes, does the
Proposed
uh,
ban.
does the proposed ban, does this necessarily mean that the people cannot eliminate a tyrannical government? And the answer is no, the people could probably still do it. They could do it through
And
mass
if
protest. They could do it with older firearms technology. They could do it with asymmetric warfare. They could do it through legislation. They could do it through politicians. There's 10,000 different avenues that Americans would still have in order to abolish a tyrannical government.
yeah, I even accepting I quibble a lot with Second Amendment people's and I'll end on this and then I'll give you the last word. Um, their conception of the Second Amendment as being because I do think there's much more of a state versus federal concern there. Um, Now I've recognized that the case law currently is that there's an individual right to own guns, and I accept that that's the case law. I'm not looking to overturn Heller at the moment. That's not my position.
At the moment.
That's not my stated position, and I think that it's almost
It's not my stated position.
it's almost
You
futile because
you guys catching that?
the reality is just like abortion, right? That this
Yeah.
country has so many guns. It's practically and the same thing with illegal immigration, right? There's so many people here without authorization to be here that the notion that you would be able to effectively round up all these guns or effectively round up all these people without authorization, it just to me doesn't seem like a practicable solution in the United States of America. So that's all the policy concerns there. But even accepting the framework that you've offered, you've made some caveats here. You've said even with older weaponry, it could still serve a kind of a similar purpose as what was envisioned as I see the Second Amendment. And so I think reasonable minds can disagree on when the right becomes meaningless. When you made so much Swiss cheese of the Fourth Amendment or so much Swiss cheese of the First Amendment that now the right has been practically excised. I think reasonable
So
minds can disagree, and I think that the assault weapons ban, to the extent that it transgresses that, the courts are well positioned in favor of guns to regulate those meets and bounds.
okay, I take that, but the problem that I have, the objection and the fear and the anxiety is from the perspective of I look at California and I look at New York, and the second part of the clause is right, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, right?
Yeah,
And the truth is that I think that there are unreasonable infringements on that right in California and New York
currently.
that grossly violate the Second Amendment. And so those would be the counties. There's concealed weapons permits, right?
Yeah.
And so open carry is largely banned in the United States. There's a bunch of red states that still
Yeah,
have
like
it,
why is
but
that
they're
acceptable, right? Why is that okay?
well, why is it not okay?
Because
So, but what?
open making an open carrying ban, like you're stopping people from like I don't know openly shooting and doing range shooting that would have been done at the time of like people were open and carrying at the time of the founding framing, and so like what's the logic in
Well,
saying
hold on.
yeah
Well, so sorry, I want to get
sure
this
my
point
bad
so we
my
don't
bad
get distracted. So in a lot of counties in New York, specifically New York City, and then also Los
yeah
Angeles, they're not. shall issue, meaning that if you pass a background check and you pass the firearm safety course, they
There
will
may
give you a
issue.
concealed, there may issue, meaning that it's basically become a privilege where law enforcement officers have to sign off on it. And then as a result, it's people who are well connected or who have like, they can actually demonstrate extra cause, like they're in a rough neighborhood and they're a
Yeah, that's
shopkeeper
being
or something
litigated
like
right
that.
now, though,
But
and those kinds of discretionary calls. And I understand why gun proponents can be, especially when they're standardless and just discretionary without any kind of stated standard. I can see why people might find that problematic, but that's the courts are well positioned to take that on. And another kind of
we're well
standard.
positioned to take that on. I mean, some of these things have been sitting for 30 or 40 years.
New York's gun laws have been pummeled by the Supreme Court. I mean, the Bruin case was literally uh, undid some of the old New York gun laws. It is
Good.
true that, but there you go. You've been having win after win after win. Ultimately, like I get the concern from a Second Amendment perspective, but I think the argument is at the bottom a legal argument about what the Constitution means. We should not be trying to enact our policy visions to determine what the Constitution means, except to the extent that the policy is kind of a purpose of an amendment in the sense that like the Constitution takes into consideration a policy goal as thought of at the time of the framing of those particular provisions. And so I don't like when these arguments are framed in policy when these are legal arguments. I guess is my ultimate thing is that if you are saying that the assault weapons ban is a step too far as the Second Amendment is concerned, that needs to be couched not in policy in this kind of
Mhm.
broad sense. I think that there needs to be a more precise legal analysis of specifically why this is undermining the Second Amendment. Because if it's not undermining the Second Amendment, then states are free not to enact these laws, and democracy should rule. Or you should be free to make a stronger
Well,
Second
yeah, I
Amendment. You
would.
know?
Well, shit. It right there. If it was up to the states, I wouldn't give a flying fuck. So if I'm serious, like if California and New York and all the blue states, Maryland, whatever, Virginia now, I guess, if they all did state level assault weapons bans, but they did do shall issue, meaning that they're fulfilling, in my
Of the
vision,
other
the
guns, pretty
Second
much.
Amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you could have like a revolver or a 10-round limited capacity Glock or whatever the hell, right? Then at that point, I don't care because the Second Amendment is still being fulfilled, and on top of that, we're making the determinations for where the lines
But
are.
then, but all these
My
all these
problem,
battlefronts are in the state, and what the courts are
but
saying is,
the feds are saying that they're going to do it though, or
I
at least
I
Kamala
understand.
does, which I think is an incredible waste of
I
political
understand that,
capital.
but note right now, what's been happening for the past decade has been blue states with overwhelming majorities have passed gun laws that they overwhelmingly agree with, and Republicans have gone into federal courts and struck down. Where's the democracy there? Well, what we know about the
Well,
Constitution is
based.
it's supposed to protect even against majorities. That's the whole point of having a constitutional republic with liberty. And so we understand, but what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If the Second Amendment means that assault weapons ban's okay, that's what it means. And if it means it's not okay, that's what it means. And we have to accept that and move on. But it cannot be the situation where
But I don't think it does. And
okay,
so I think we're gonna have to probably put a
yeah,
pin in this
then
for the next
yeah,
time, just because we're
it's late as
I'm
fuck.
running out of brain
Yeah,
energy.
yeah.
But no, I think that it can be in good faith argued that assault weapons, specifically like semi-automatic intermediate cartridge rifles that are capable of taking out crowds of people at a time or whatever,
Sure.
I think it can be argued that like the spirit of the Second Amendment can still be fulfilled without this technology being widely available. And so, and it could be more highly regulated, and it still wouldn't violate the Second
And we
Amendment.
need to do a
Uh,
look into a deep dive into the history, I think, and into the
Well, I
principles.
borderline feel like I need to do a legalistic
Yeah,
analysis
I
of
agree.
like why would assault weapons bans be necessary for the Second Amendment or whatever? Because I feel like here's the thing is like with the Constitution, I think that the interpretation that I'm considering, both of them are viable,
Yeah.
but the problem is that like I don't have a compelling argument for why intermediate caliber semi-automatic rifles are necessary to fulfill it. And so I need to think about that.
And but just keep in mind, I'm just going to give you the counter argument against my position as well.
Mhm.
Why do we have a good argument that those guns are excluded? And so it's both sides, right? So like we would have to say the Second
Kind of
Amendment
statistically very small amount.
right. So it's like we'd have to make an argument that somehow the semi-automatic nature of it, the fact that it's in wide circulation or not wide circulation, the fact that it's a weapon of war versus not a weapon of war, these are really complicated questions where we're making the standards. Is like, who knows what they were thinking? They weren't thinking of this shit when they passed it, right?
Well, and I think I would actually go down that exact line of attack. I was grasping at straws. I'm happy you kind of gave me that.
Yeah.
With that, it actually would be, because for me, the primary issue, right, is mass shootings and terrorism. That's why people care about assault weapons, right? Is assault weapons are like the preferred weapon of mass shooters and terrorists. And so
you're thinking about policy right now, right? You're thinking about
Mhm.
the policy goals of the people putting the ban. That's kind of irrelevant to whether or well, it actually could be relevant. So you should continue, but just keep in mind that is a kind of, what is the rationale for the law? What is the burden that it's imposing, and what's the justification? But separate and apart from that is like, does the Second Amendment even protect at all these kinds of weapons? And that's kind of independent of it. And so you should, if you're going to make the attack, you should be like, well, where in the Second Amendment does it say arms are only arms that are at the time of the founding? Like, it literally only means muskets? No, that's been rejected, right? So
no, but then it actually does get into a progressive versus a originalist interpretation of the Constitution, because when you're talking about the originalist vision is George Washington, the founding fathers, all of them saying that in order to maintain a free society, you have to have some level of peer technology between the government and the people in order for the people to be able to rebel without, or just to check the tyranny of the federal government. Maybe not even a rebellion.
Maybe that's the analysis. But if that's the analysis, understand the explosion of the principle there, where if it's parity, tanks, anti-aircraft, all that stuff, right? So just understand the principles there, and let's talk about this later at a different point. I really appreciated you coming on and chatting. This was a really fun conversation for me, and to speak to you as a human being, as opposed to this fascist avatar that I see in the and I'm sorry for calling fascist. It's tongue in cheek.
No, it's fine. I don't care.
Yeah.
And also what I would say is we should do a fascist avatar debate sometime soon.
Yeah.
About power and where it emanates from, and proper governance, and what's the right to vote versus the right to defend yourself, et cetera, et cetera.
Go on, killer. Go to your woman and have a great night. Right. And we'll speak soon. Okay.
Appreciate you, King.